Hello and welcome to the SuperShow podcast, a gaming podcast where we discuss games, but consistently and only games, because we're a gaming podcast, what I'm trying to say. And I'm joined by two fellow gamers and players of
Capital
games.
G?
Capital G's. You are my G's with like big cap. Right, I'm talking about Jamie and Jonesy. How you doing, fellas?
See, I've always identified more as a lowercase g gamer. I don't know why. I don't know what that says about me. But I'm happy to be here.
Interesting. Okay.
I think of myself as a backwards G gamer. It's like a Q, like a Quamer or something.
Jonesy, I've always said that you're a massive Quamer.
Yeah, you filthy Quamer. Well,
I love to Quame.
It's gone super weird now. Hello. I thought, you know what? Usually we swear in the first opening minute or, go down some fucking weird rabbit hole. But I thought this time we're going to start off with the gaming focus. And you know what? To kind of add to that, I'm going to tell everybody what we are going to be talking about in this here podcast, little lady. I'm talking about some Last of Us Part 1 reviews and, of course, all the kind of discourse around it, okay? I am talking about Nintendo Direct potentially coming in the future with some interesting Nintendo games, as you would expect from a Nintendo Direct. Strange, I know. Konami also says that they're going to announce something from a series loved around the world at Tokyo Game Show. Fellas, the fucking game train doesn't stop there, because we're going to be talking about Assassin's Creed Mirage being leaked by Ubisoft again, those poor fuckers. And when the internet went absolutely fucking crazy, when gaming Twitter, if that is a thing, went absolutely fucking nuts off their mother's milk about Amazon potentially buying EA. And if we have time, we'll talk about Sony being greedy fuckers. Fellas, I have been away for 2 weeks, not on the podcast. And I just want to take this moment to extend my heartfelt thanks that you held the fort. Jonesy?
Nice. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's good to have you back, though.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I must be honest, my motivation is at an all-time low. But hey.
Well, don't say that at the start of the pod. You've ruined it now.
Because you've got
50% of the people just
to your heart.
Yeah, exactly.
What, 50% of the people just pulled out? Story of my life.
They just pulled. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
they just came on the metaphorical backs of this podcast.
Oh, on the back, yeah.
Yeah, on the back. Well, because you always.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah,
it's an option.
Jonesy clearly speaking as a pull-out master, apart from 2 occasions of note.
Yeah, right.
No, he did pull out, and he was like, "Oh shit, that should have gone in." He just tried to scoop it back in.
Wait, stay there. Don't move a muscle.
Oh, I was leaving it in, wasn't I? I was leaving it in.
You know when you squeeze out too much hand cream or something or shampoo, and then to try and get it back
Is this
in,
a metaphor?
You hold it up and you squeeze it, and then you put it up and you let the air suck it back in.
Yes.
And he's like, "No, I gotta re-inject."
Nah, it's more of a toothpaste kind of thing. Like, it's not going back in the tube. Like, you can try it.
Smears all over the tip.
Yeah,
You can't get the toothpaste back in the tube.
There's no ketchup bottle style physics that applies to the male, or I shouldn't say the male, the human penis. Like, you can't squeeze it and then it inhales.
No, you're not getting it back in you. You're getting it back in her.
No, I'm saying you've got to get it back in you to reinsert.
Like a turkey
You don't need
baster.
to. You don't need to. Once it's out, just scoop it in.
Just get a spoon. Get one of those little honey utensils.
Oh my god, what's happened to this? But no, here's a weird thought. Let's follow this route, this path that we're on.
Okay,
imagine this. Imagine you were trying for a kid with your other half, and you agreed that you were going to have a kid, and that you were going to start trying for a kid, and you were like, okay, so I'm going to leave it in, and she's like, yeah, leave it in, and then you forgot, and you didn't, as we've just said. And then the next time you did, you would have a different kid. If you'd have just remembered. And obviously she got pregnant. You would have had a completely different kid. How insane is that?
You ruined Simon's life.
Simon never existed. Simon is not even a glint in your eye anymore, because he's been wiped away on the back. He's been wiped off.
Jonesy, this is why Republicans don't like contraceptives, because that could be the second coming of JC.
I thought they did like contraceptives, because otherwise their secretaries would be chasing them for baby payments.
Allegedly.
If you were given a choice,
they'd all have monkeypox.
Oh God. I ask you, by the way, as two fathers, if you were given a choice of whether or not you could Doctor Strange your own spunk before conception and see like the millions or billions of possibilities for what that child would end up being, and you could now we're getting into like real actual scientific debates, but you could start choosing maybe I quite like the look of that one. That one's gonna win the Super Bowl.
Jonesy there was one period of time when we were all working together where Jonesy's middle name was fucking CRISPR. It was Alex CRISPR Jones, because all he was interested in was like genetically modifying your fetus.
No, not that I would want to do it. It's a fascinating subject, and I think that it won't be long before. Like, I love the film Gattaca, and I think the idea that you won't be genetically modifying human embryos, I think, is because they already do it, right? They can already do it to some degree. Like, you can. They had the first twins born that I think were immune to HIV. Because they knew that they could manipulate certain genes. And CRISPR's mad. CRISPR's crazy because they can just like snip out stuff and do whatever. But it is so interesting. But to Jamie's question, would I have Doctor Strange the universe? Not at all. Because one of the crazy things about having kids, which is amazing, is they are not little psychos, and you have no idea what flavor of psycho you're going to have. And it's so exciting and interesting and weird to like to see that unravel. And I think I would never want to change that.
Okay, like
I've already. So I was going to say, like, otherwise you'd be like, I've already seen the life story for my daughter, and I know exactly where she's going and what she's going to. I mean, it's so boring, isn't it? You don't want that.
I guess it is.
What if it's just like that big filing cabinet from
Bruce Almighty?
Bruce Almighty, yeah.
Right, you can like go through and pick someone.
Yeah, so like you don't see anything, but it's just a few words on a piece of paper.
It's like you getting a few scouting reports, and you're sitting there as the manager of the club, and you have to like good physicality, but maybe isn't going to grow past 5'7". They might get bullied as a result of that. They do have a club foot.
Wow.
Things like that.
But see,
you're just outing me here on I feel personally attacked.
I feel bad about the height example. Like, you pull out a file and it says this boy will be able to swim faster than a shark. Like, that is something I can see that you'd maybe want in a child.
No, but see, it's best laid plans, isn't it? Because you always think that over, like you just said, over 5'7". Yeah, I'm going to go for over 5'7". And think of all the go-getting, accomplished sub 5'7" guys out there because they've had to work harder for everything in their lives, and your kid is 6'2" and he's lazy as fuck because he just walks around being tall, going,
"Hang on,
I don't need to try."
Where's all this midget propaganda? How much has Chris paid you? Short men work harder.
Was it Short Kings? Short Kings.
Yeah.
I'm living my best life in the short king dimension.
I've met more interesting short kings than I have interesting lanky freaks.
Oh, wow. Yeah. There we go.
Plus, I'd feel like there'd also be like a weird monkey paw situation to all of this, which is like if the scout report said like, they're going to be 6'2", extremely athletic, extremely intelligent, there's going to be some element where they are all of those things, but they also like, they fuck a dog out at some point in their life, and you're just like, for crying out loud, you had everything going for you. The scout report didn't mention the bestiality. Well,
that was
he will be prime minister of the United Kingdom. He'll be an accomplished editor of a respected newspaper. Oh, this all sounds really good. But he will fuck a pig.
Yeah.
What?
Oh, that was David Cameron.
Oh, was that David Cameron? Okay, same deal.
Done it.
But he will fuck a pig. Is the pig alive? Is the pig dead? The pig's dead. Will anyone know about it? Some people
better or worse? I don't know.
What would you agree to?
Anyway, fellas, let's just kind of let's re-merge onto this highway of gaming, shall we? We took the turn off. Let's come back on, all right? Because we are a gaming podcast, as I mentioned before, and we do not take ourselves too seriously, which was a catchphrase.
And we don't wonk off pogs, okay? We don't touch them. We're not porcine fiddlers. I just want to say that now.
Oh, pigs. You said pogs.
I said wonked off a pog.
We've gone full Twitch emote mode.
Yeah, I was like, poggers? It is pretty poggers if you think about it.
Have you ever wonked off a poggers?
That. Someone said about you, so they wonked off a pog rather than wanked off a pig.
That sounds so
I can't
dodgy.
remember I heard that.
Wonked
it does,
off a pog.
Wonked off a pog.
I like that. But no, just back on the gaming highway, all right? Because fellas, we're a gaming podcast, and we're available on YouTube if you're watching us live, like seeing these beautiful visages, okay? But if you don't want to, burn your retinas, then you can also listen to us on a podcasting platform of your choice. I'm talking Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, some of those others. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. Just listen to us where you can get it. And hey, if you're not interested in any of that, if you want a more kind of like authentic experience, one where you can like whip out a lighter and have it as a like analog facsimile in a digital world, then I'm talking about catching us on Paisley Radio, paisleyradio.com, Thursdays at 10 p.m, repeats on Mondays, where you can hear us play out as if we were on the radio, but digitally. It's amazing. Technology has taken us so far. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think we peaked. That's the sad thing.
Exactly. Like CRISPR, get the fuck out of here. We got Paisley Radio, fuckers. Scientists. Ooh.
Who needs CRISPR when you've got Paisley Radio?
Exactly. You know what's weird about this whole conversation is you guys have said the word CRISPR about 15 times. I've got no idea what CRISPR is.
It's the gene editing thing.
It sounds like someone with a bad memory trying to talk about their favourite actor in Charlie's Angels.
CRISPR Glovin.
Exactly. Just getting it completely wrong.
CRISPR is just a way, Jamie, to snip out parts of the gene code that you don't want in there.
Well,
and it can go to specific places.
Why didn't I get CRISPR'd then? Who left the fat gene
didn't
in
exist.
No, you did, because you got blue eyes. You got.
I do have deep pools of baby blue ocean.
Exactly. You get lost in those for days, buddy.
And
they did
that's
take the fat
to
gene out of
YouTube,
you.
by the way.
They did take the fat gene out of you, but they left all the chocolate eclairs in your room.
Oh, right. I ate the fat gene back into existence. It's like nature versus nurture. I just nurtured my way back into being obese.
Oh, I fucking love that. That's amazing.
I was chatting to a friend yesterday who like she makes like loads of baked stuff, like baked goods and whatever.
Oh.
And when I had COVID, like quite badly, like lost, and I was like, I lost shitloads of weight. I lost like 9 kilos or something. And then she was telling me yesterday, she was like, oh, because a lot of the stuff I make has got so many calories in it. And I was like, yeah, I fucking know. I'm fatter now than I was before I got COVID. Like, I lost 9K. I've put back on about 13. It's just all baked goods.
Yeah.
Like Homer Simpson with
just asking
donuts.
Yeah, asking for a friend. Does she sell the baked goods, or is this like a kind of like a friend kind of?
No, she sells the baked goods in Selfridges. Yeah.
Oh shit! Yeah, you were telling us about it.
Yeah.
Okay, just my friend. Tasty. I've got a friend who might be interested in. I'll pick this up later. He really. She has
a website and she delivers. So
Do the baked goods come with powdered sugar? Again, the friend is just wondering.
I don't know. Maybe some of them do.
In fact, thinking about it, the friend keeps a bag of powdered sugar on his desk at all times. So
in case he wants French toast.
That scene from Scarface. He just sits there with a pile of powdered sugar in front of him. You fucking cockroaches want to come and take my baked goods? Okay, I'm reloading.
See, whenever you say powdered sugar, I think of the scene from is it Road Trip, where he says, "I ordered my French toast with no powdered sugar."
Oh and god, yeah.
Like,
licks it all off, puts it on his crotch,
shoves it in his.
We've all been there, fellas. We've all been there. You know where else we've been?
In a video game conversation.
Exactly, in a video game conversation about a game that we've all played that has now been re-released as a remake. I'm talking about The Last of Us Part 1. It wasn't previously called Part 1, it was just The Last of Us. Before Part 2 was, just when it was just a twinkle in Dr. Uckman's eye. But then Part 2 came out, and what you do, you don't make a Part 3, because fuck that. You go back and you just call the first one Part 1, and you put some bells and whistles on it. And bells and whistles they have done, fellas. Like, that is a good-looking game. We have discussed this before. Granted, a lot of work has been put into it. Is it worth the $70? It's the age-old debate. It's something that will probably not be resolved, to be fair.
Oh, no, we can resolve it right now. It's quite easy.
I don't think we can resolve it.
Okay, hold on. Jonesy says we can resolve it. There are 3 white males, prime gamers.
That's all you need.
Okay,
one capital G, one lowercase g, one backwards G.
Yeah. Well,
diversity.
Diversity. I mean, yeah, totally, So go on, Jonesy, what is your take? Is it worth $70 with all the things and the bells and whistles and adding Part 1 to the title?
Yes.
Okay. Jamie.
Okay.
No, just nice and easy. Jamie, is it worth it?
Do I have to give a yes or no answer?
Yeah, and without quantifying it. Because this is democracy manifest.
In that case, fundamentally, the answer is yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm saying no. So there you go, Jonesy. You're wrong. We can't agree on it.
Can I expand on why I say yes? And this, when it comes down to is it worth it? It's an interesting question because worth it is like a bit of a weird concept because it's worth it to you if you're willing to pay that money for it. So the idea of worth it, gets a little bit weird because they can only sell it for what they can afford to sell it for, and they would have obviously done the market research, say how much should we sell this game for. But I think fundamentally the reason it is worth the $70 price tag is because this is a ground up remake. This is a 20-hour game. They didn't need to go and rewrite the story. They didn't need to re-record some of the dialogue, and they didn't need to do some mocap stuff. But you still got a team of people at Naughty Dog remaking this entire game from start to finish. Even though you're reusing animations, you're still redoing all of that work. You've still got the same marketing budget. You still got to pay all those people. You still got to do all that stuff. And games, this is one of the problems I think we've got with video games is they were artificially deflated. The price of them was for such a long time that it put everyone into this weird mindset that games should only cost $35.99 even now, which is insane. If you look at like inflation and how games have changed over time. And when I was a kid, when I started playing games back in the early 90s, like end of the 80s, they were insanely expensive. You had like a 1 hour game that had barely anything in it that took one guy like a week to make would sell for the equivalent of now like $120 in today's money.
Jamie's recalling the time that his parents got him ET for the Atari.
Yeah, literally, I was thinking of ET when I said it. The one guy, it took him like a week to make it, and the equivalent money in today's money is like, or the equivalent value in today's money is like $120. It's insane, and the game was like 3 hours long and was awful. So the idea that it's not worth it to me, I'm like, look, that is the price tag on that product is probably about right. That's what they've decided a full price game is. For me, if you're going to say that it shouldn't be $70, you're going to say it should be $35, for example, half price. That's to me, that's like DLC, or it's like a small indie game that doesn't have much content in it with a small team and a small overhead. But I mean, is anyone questioning whether this was a full team of devs and other people working on this and marketing and
no, I don't think they're questioning that aspect of it.
So then I'm not really sure why the price gets questioned, because if it's taken a full team to do it and it's taken a long time to put it together, just because it's a remake.
Well, I think the price argument, and Chris, maybe you're slightly better suited to talking this as the kind of the person who doesn't think it justifies that price tag, but it seems as though it's grounded in this is them selling the third game. This is them selling a game for the third time in 9 years with less content than it had when it originally launched, and much less content than it had when it launched on PS4, for example. With no discount available to anyone that owns any previous version of the game, and the extent to which it is a different product is entirely subjective. And so people who fall on the side of the spectrum that don't think it's done enough to differentiate itself as a new product or as something that's built for a new generation or a new console or whatever, they are more inclined to say that it doesn't justify that $70 price tag.
Yep, pretty much that.
I've been eating Italian BMTs from Subway for like 15 years. I don't get a discount because they've been making them for a long time. And
well, you can get a discount if you get a loyalty card, mate. Like I
don't have it. I should get a loyalty card.
I hate to break it to you. There are ways. No, but
I don't. Sorry, go on, Chris.
So I think Jamie makes a very valid point. Then it is kind of like following the argument against this kind of thing. I think for me, the reason why it's a hard no is potentially less so for what actually happened, but more a case of like what it means for the industry. Because now all of a sudden it's okay for Sony to do this, right? Especially
when you say what it means for the industry, you mean
it sets a bad precedent. I feel like let's put it this way. If they had said it's a $70 game, but hey, if you have the fucking PS4 remaster, then maybe you'll get like a $20 discount. Whatever the discount, it doesn't actually matter. Like, that's more consumer friendly than what is happening at the moment. Okay? Now, there is the argument to be made that like, hey, people haven't experienced this game, and this is going to be the most definitive way of experiencing it. And that's absolutely fine, and that's absolutely fair. But again, does it we can argue until we're blue in the face whether something like this was necessary, okay? But it's happened. Like, there's no point in kind of arguing what's happened. But it's more a case of like, okay, so from this point on, what is next? You know, like we talked about fucking DLC, microtransactions, all of this, and we get annoyed by it, and we're okay with some of it, and you know, some companies just kind of go a little bit kind of crazy for stuff like this. But if you think back, it all starts somewhere, and it all started with fucking horse armor in Oblivion, right? Like all of this shit starts somewhere, and I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that like while I enjoyed The Last of Us Part 1, for lack of a better word, maybe I'm just not as crazy about it as a core game experience, that this doesn't matter too much for me. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe if it was a game that I was really fucking obsessed about and something like this happened, then maybe I'd be, you know, I'm just being honest here. Maybe I would look at it differently. But I guess because I don't have those kind of rose-tinted glasses, I think maybe I can look at it a bit more analytically. Does that make sense?
I would say it's quite ironic because I think you're not looking at it that analytically. I think you're kind of because I get
why am I how is anything I've said not being analytical?
Because I think
it could be analytically wrong or analytically correct, but how is it not analytical?
Oh, because I think if you're being more analytical and say completely analytical and going, the game cost this much to produce, therefore they can sell it for the X price, and they know they've done market research, they can sell it for that. I'd be with you, but it sounds like you're saying you think it's a bit unfair, which I would say is not necessarily.
There's an element to that, but if you want me to take it into the full on analytical thing, how much did they release Last of Us Part 2 for? How long did it take them to create Last of Us Part 2? What was their budget, etc.? And what was the price that game came out at? And now tell me how long and how many people and what they had to do for Last of Us Part 1. Remake.
Oh, I guarantee not as much, absolutely. But I think the thing these days is like that. It's almost like Last of Us Part 2 would have been capped because they couldn't have sold it for more than $70 because that's like it's almost like a gaming cap, right? So even if your game costs more, you have to almost try and make more money in different ways. So you have to sell it to more people, you have to ship more units, you have to have an online component. But what I assume anyway with Part 1 is they're like, we're going to sell fewer units than we did for Last of Us Part 2. But it's cost us a shitload of money to make it, and to recoup that cost, we have to sell it to a certain number of people to make. Because you were saying like, you don't think it's worth it in that sense, and I'm like, I completely agree with you. For a lot of people, this won't be worth it. I don't think they should buy it. Like, I don't think this is a game. If you want to, you can go and pick up the remaster, and you will have a great time. It's still a completely viable option. You don't need to spend $70. I just think like this is a specific thing for a specific subset of people that want to play this game in the best fashion it's ever been released.
Yeah, and
I'm with you. I'm like, yeah, 70 cool. Like, I wouldn't say to someone, you don't go and pay full price to see a film, which is a remake of an old film. You could just see the old film and it's £1 on DVD. And then I'd be like, but they should have released it at the cinema for $5.
No, but hold on, because
it's a remake.
But you're forgetting the difference here, okay? Where,
go on.
Like, take a film that's only 10 years old and tell me that they're remaking it. Every time that something like that happens, people are up in arms saying like, why are we fucking remaking something that's 10 years old?
It's interesting that we're talking about films and we kind of got into that kind of conversation, because did either of you two watch Skillup's review of this product, The Last of Us Part 1?
I didn't.
No, I didn't know.
It came out net positive. He's kind of in the Chris camp of this is a game that he played and sort of understands and admires, but he's not, in the same... he hasn't gone to that other level that some people exist on, that other plane that some people exist on when it comes to their love and admiration for The Last of Us Part 1. But he frames his entire review so he mentions in his intro and then loops back around to his kind of closing thought. He frames his entire review around the film RoboCop and how he bought the RoboCop VHS and he bought the RoboCop DVD and he bought the RoboCop Blu-ray. And a few years ago, when RoboCop got like reissued in 4K in a big collector's edition, he went out and spent $100 or $200 on it or whatever it was. And any conversation around whether or not RoboCop was worth $200 is completely irrelevant to him, because RoboCop was worth $200 to him, and it didn't. Yeah. And that wasn't a remake. I'm
the same with Back to the Future and like Indiana Jones and Gladiator. Anytime those movies get re-released in a better format, and it's like you say, it's not even a remake, I just go and buy it.
Yeah. exactly. And so that's why, Chris, when you kind of frame that question at the beginning, and like, is it worth $70? And I had to kind of give a point blank yes or no answer. Like, I come down on the side of things like saying yes, because I think fundamentally it's worth $70 to the people who buy it, and to the people it's not worth $70 for, they shouldn't buy it. And so what you end up is what you're left with is a pool of exclusively of people to whom it's clearly worth $70. And I think sometimes, like, looking into budgetary stuff and like how many units a game has to sell, like, I don't think there's this like a mathematical theorem that comes up at the end of game development where you're like, this many units times this much unit price equals crossing the line on this budget. I think it's just one of those things of like, often it's probably as cheeky.
You don't. I think they start the entire conversation with that before they even make the game. I think they literally sit down and go.
I think every studio on some levels is aware of break-even points and knows how many units they have to sell to break even and to turn a profit and so on and so forth. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if a large amount of what informs the price tag of a product like this, for example, is what's the highest price that we can put this for sale for that people will buy it at.
Yeah, what can we get away with?
which kind of ties into what Jonesy's saying, because it does come down to like a supply and demand kind of thing, which is that like which price is too high to then get the number of required sales to break even and so on and so forth. So there is some of that at play here. But yeah, like fundamentally, I think it's just one of those things that it's worth it to the people it's worth it to. As sort of weirdly simplistic and almost reductive a take as that is. Like Jonesy and I are not those people right now. This product releases on Friday, tomorrow, as we're recording this. Neither of us are buying it tomorrow, to my knowledge.
Nope.
I love The Last of Us. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I really want to play this video game. The PS5, I watched the entire 50-minute Digital Foundry breakdown. I love what they've done with this thing. I love what it looks like. I love the way they've changed certain character models. I like the idea of messing around with accessibility features, not for the sake of making the experience easier, but like maybe tweaking some things or playing a version of The Last of Us that I hadn't quite played before. All of that stuff, and even just experiencing that story again really appeals to me. But I don't want to pay £70 for it, so I'll pay another fee at another point. At which point, and that's the great thing about the way video games work is we'll all get our right to do that. It's like it'll reach a point where
you wait for a sale and exactly. Unless it's Nintendo, then you're fine.
That's a good point. That's a good point, because that's like when you say is it worth £70? What I think these days what you should really think is it worth £70 to pay now so I can play it today? Because like as you guys have both just said, you can wait. You can wait till it comes on another service. You can wait until you can play it some other way. And for me, it's like, is it worth £70? Yes, this is a 20-hour long video game, ground up remake, blah, 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 blah. It's worth £70 to the people that want to play it day one. And to people like me, to Jamie, it sounds like, similar. It's worth maybe, I don't know, £40 in a year's time or 9 months time or whatever. Or it's worth waiting for some kind of like, or maybe a day. Do you know what? More realistic, a lull in whatever, and then you go, oh, I've got some spare cash and I've got nothing to play. Do you know what I haven't played? The remake of The Last of Us Part 1. Like, whether they should have made it is a completely different question, and I think I'd come down in maybe a different way on that. But I can't really criticize the price that they've put on it.
Yeah, and I also just feel like I think I said this a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at leaks. Personally, I feel like enough work. I think that I hate to be the person that just like sort of like drops quotes from Digital Foundry and sort of like dissects their opinion and use it as my own. But I think it was John says in the Digital Foundry video that like this is as definitive and as masterful a remake as you can possibly do of a video game that's this old. And so if you kind of look at like Naughty Dog as being in a their hands are tied situation, that, someone somewhere at PlayStation, Sony, and the higher ups at Naughty Dog, like the documents were signed and the Last of Us remake was the next project that was greenlit, and that's what they were working on. I still stand by the fact that I think they've done an unreal job. That's not an Unreal with a capital U, by the way. That's they've done
an
a very
Unreal
good
Engine 5 job.
I think they've done a very good job, which is why I come down. When you come down like is this a cash grab argument? I don't think this is a cash grab just by virtue of I think there's too much love and too much effort and too much hard work that's gone into it for me to feel entirely comfortable calling it a cash grab.
I'd agree with that. I wouldn't say that it's a cash grab at all. I just don't think it's worth it.
No, I agree.
There is a bit of a difference there, but yeah, some people are kind of flouting it as it's a cash grab. But like you're right. Like it's not. They could have just done the bare minimum and slapped up any old price on it. That's a cash grab.
But there are also like I do kind of understand some things where like some people are looking at the upcoming HBO series and like saying, oh, this is like a tie into that, and it's just them trying to sort of like poach as many new Last of Us fans as they possibly can and sway or convince as many existing Last of Us fans as they can for a product that maybe shouldn't be as expensive as it is. And don't get me wrong, there is a part of me that does hear that thinking and does engage with it somewhat. I think I'm just more won over than some people are by the work that's gone into it.
Yeah.
On a technical level. Like I haven't watched full scene. I'm still seeing screenshots of this game that make me go, oh wow, like they did that. And I know those are screenshots, and I know that's visuals, and I know that the fundamental experience could be identical for some people as to something that they had 8 years ago at this point. And if that's the case, don't pay $70 for this. But I don't think that means that it's not worth it in a objective, broader sense.
I'm interested to get your guys' opinions on this, because one thing that struck me was, and one thing I saw was a lot of people were sharing, like as they do, the blanket review scores when this dropped, and it was like 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5.
Pretty
like
mad, yeah.
97, like super, super high. And one thing I always find strange about that is, even though the original's only 8 years old, to my mind, like if you've just, because what they've done is a ground up remake, but it is effectively just to improve the visuals throughout the entire game, right? And also some quality of life, a little bit of quality of life stuff, and like frame rate and how good the lighting effects and things like that look. And then I have to say, is an 8-year-old game which is still fundamentally using similar, like very similar controls and look and feel and the way the character moves, etc., whilst they have tweaked some of that stuff. Is it actually viable that this game is a 10 out of 10, a 5 out of 5, 97 game, when in reality, if this was a game that was brand new, we'd never heard of, hadn't come out, and was a PlayStation 5 exclusive, would we be saying things more like some of the controls and some of the level design is dated, the lack of verticality is they're not really pushing the envelope? Would we be more rightfully critical of the product if it was new?
In my opinion, undoubtedly, yes. I think I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know this for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised that if we went and found reviews of the people who'd given The Last of Us Part 1 a 10 out of 10, for example, there's going to be some kind of an emotional attachment to the original game. There's going to be an idea that this is the definitive version of one of the best games of all time, and so subsequently it's a 10 out of 10. And in fact, I think in some reviews, they are very upfront and very black and white about the fact that there's an emotional attachment to the game that they're essentially re-reviewing in this case. One example that comes to mind, ironically, he gave it an 8 out of 10, but Jake Decker's review for GameSpot, he opens up about the fact that he was he worked in film, or was trying to find work in film, and The Last of Us was the game that made him say, I'm going to write about video games. And now, 9 years later, he works for GameSpot. So I think everyone's got stories like that and versions of that and ways in which a title like this is going to fit into their lives. And I think that there's a part of me that has to believe that those connections and that history influences a potential 10 out of 10 review. Because you can't call The Last of Us a perfect game by today's standards. So I don't think that's what they're doing. Although I will also say that in spite of how pretty those tweets look, where they stack every single review in order, in sort of chronological order and like going down in terms average wise, like Metacritic wise, this is the worst reviewed of the 3 Last of Us releases. So there is a suggestion that every time The Last of Us comes out, critics like it less, which does more align with what you'd think, which is that ideas and mechanics and concepts are aging and they're less effective with time.
Yeah. But it is a good question, though, Jonesy. And I think time has a lot to do with it as well, right? Like, if a game that is as close, if the remaster is as close to the original as this is, then stuff can still hold up. Like, no one's gonna look at a game from like the SNES era that got a 10 out of 10 and it gets a remake here, and then it gets like similar stuff, because fundamentally things are so different, right? I mean, maybe it would. You know, maybe on Nintendo side it would.
You say that. I think there are some people that if you ask them to do like a 2022 review of like Ocarina of Time or something like that, they'd still give it a 10. Some journalists.
Well, they'd be wrong, but yeah.
That's how you create the thing that Jonesy's talking about, which is that why do some people still think this is perfect? Because that's the way they're wired to review things.
But this is, don't get me wrong, Last of Us is one of my favorite games like of all time, and Last of Us Part 2 is probably my favorite game like of all time. Like, but mostly because I think it improved upon the original. And it wouldn't have been, I don't think it would have been as good if it wasn't a sequel to that game. That having been said, I can't imagine sitting down, playing it through, and now thinking, do you know what I mean? And now thinking, oh, this is exactly what I would have given it when it came out originally. Because there are going to be things now I'll look at and be like, oh, this isn't as good. This is kind of grated on me. It's the sort of thing you sit down with like Red Dead Redemption, and it's such an amazing game. Try and play it now, and you're going to be going, oh my, like, Jesus Christ, I'm struggling through this. Like, there's a load of stuff which has just improved in gaming over time. And if you then gave me a ground up remake, but you kept a load of that stuff that was frustrating, and you were sort of getting annoyed with when you played that game, I would never expect it to get like a 10 out of 10 or whatever that game got on.
Yeah. It's like it's like, to take your Ocarina of Time example, right? Like when they did the 3DS version of Ocarina of Time, like one of the best things they did was like, oh yeah, hey, like your boots in the water temple, you just fucking click a button and it's done, right?
Yeah.
If they had redone that for the 3DS and they're like, no, we're going to stay true to the vision, and you've got to go through 5 menus to change your boots in a puzzle that requires you to change your boots every 2 minutes, like, you're not going to give it a 10 out of 10. And if you are, you're a fucking idiot reviewer. Right?
Well, yes.
But then, I've got another question to kind of lead into you guys, okay? Is it, obviously, reviewers and their emotions with regards to games is an important aspect of reviewing a game, right? But I feel that, like, if a reviewer goes too far in one direction, then they are not, they're being disingenuous in terms of their review, right? Because then they're not doing their job as a reviewer. Yeah. What they're doing is they're just doing a write-up as a fan, which is a very big distinction. Right. And I think a few outlets, not just on this game, but like in the past have done this, and it grates me to no end. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, certainly. I think there was a lot of this present. Josie and I didn't really get into it at the time, but when Saints Row came out a few weeks ago, it's so funny to me because we kind of live in this era around video game review and video game review discourse where it's increasingly popular to not trust quote unquote video game journalists, whatever that term even means. Like even that is a mess in and of itself. But like someone that works for an IGN or a GameSpot, why? Because I don't even know anymore. But like some people still think those guys are being paid to write favorable or less than favorable reviews. Some people still think that advertising and advertising money has as big a sway as it did circa 2006, 2007. Some people just think that they're all woke and left and like, that the people employed by Kotaku and Polygon represent the whole spectrum of writers, and it's just not the case. And in that gulf, I think people have taken to filling that space with what appear at first glance to be more independent voices that have grown to prominence through platforms like YouTube and in other parts of social media, because they're just regular guys like you and me, and they're not on the take, and they're not video games journalists, and so they're not woke, and they say it how it is, baby. When the reality is that like loads of people got free copies of Saints Row. We got free copies of Saints Row. Do you know who didn't? Kotaku. The guy who reviewed Saints Row for Kotaku went out and bought his copy of Saints Row because Kotaku didn't get bought. But it's like when someone on the YouTube side of things goes and does their write up, and they're fucking sponsored by G Fuel and they've got a big VPN spot in the middle. We're like, wow, I'm glad I'm getting like grassroots independent reviews here from someone that's definitely not the most. And some of it, Chris, ties back to
supplied the code as well, yeah,
right. Which then, Chris, goes back to I think a video that you've been very fond of in the past, and like Ranton's whole thing about like you can't be impartial if you feel like you're reliant on the codes that you get for your content. And you feel like there's a relationship between the way you handle those codes and the way you review those games and your ability to continue getting that access in the future. In spite of that point, though, going back to more like what you were talking about, Chris, I think that the reason I'm personally less drawn to, ironically, people like us, compared to, say, an IGN or a GameSpot, is because we inherently are more beholden to a machine than they are. They have their advertising money. The big banner for fucking Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings or whatever the fuck it is flashes on and off all day at IGN 24/7, regardless of whether they give regardless of whether or not they give Saints Row a 4 out of 10 and try and get as many people worked up as they can, or whether they give it a 6 or a 7 out of 10 and it just kind of like, pisses in the wind like everything and everyone else. Whereas I think on YouTube you see a far greater proportion of people who feel like they are a part of that rat race, and the idea of a Saints Row game being average is the least appealing idea to them imaginable, because there's nothing engaging about it, and it's very hard to write an engaging title and find an engaging thumbnail around a game that's just fine. Like no one wants to be the guy that says Saints Row is really fine, you might like it. You have to, and so all of a sudden you become the person that's like, it's an absolute woke mess, and it's and blah, 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 and you start diving into the depths of everywhere you need to go to make a living, which I do understand, and it's the game that we have to play as well. But that's, Chris, to like where I start to lose the thread a little bit around.
I agree with you and disagree with you at the same time. I think
surprise.
No, because I completely agree when it comes to like people like us, YouTubers, whatever. You are, and everyone has seen this. You are, by virtue of clicks and views and what people seem to relate to, it's the reaction face, right? It's the thing that when a game comes out and someone's like first sees it and they do that. And it's like, you don't really feel like that. You take that picture because people click on that. Yeah. And I think the same thing with like YouTubers, reviews, especially, they are sort of pushed to be more sensational than they would be, either one way or the other, right? Which means that you, rather than be average, like Jamie was saying, you go to, this is incredible, or you go to, this is awful. And there's, because it's that, don't sit on the fence, because you've got to go one or the other, or people will kind of go, this is boring. I want to hear someone go mental and angry and scream, or I want to hear someone be in love with it. Similarly, I don't think the magazine sort of style sites, your IGNs, your GameSpots, have the same problem. As Jamie said, I think that the money comes in whatever. But I do think they have a different problem, which their problem is, the political correctness would be the wrong word. But there is almost like I feel like there is a sense of, you need to have the correct opinion about some games, otherwise your opinion isn't valid. So when it comes to something,
are you saying like a social responsibility almost?
Not so. That's why I said political correctness is the wrong word. Like a intergaming political correctness, whereby if you were to say that you didn't like a new Super Mario game because you just didn't like it, the platform was very good, you'd get eviscerated. And you know that everyone's going to come out and score it really highly. So you feel pressured to predisposed to like some things. I think this is the problem that Cyberpunk had. Everyone was in love with CD Projekt Red. Everyone was in love with The Witcher 3. Even though that game was littered with problems, they were told, don't worry, when it comes out, it will be fine. And rather than do their due diligence and be honest and say, guys, this game is not ready, it's a 7 out of 10, it's whatever, they gave it very high marks. And then the audience, when they actually got their hands on the game, were pissed off. And we all took the piss out of that reviewer who was like the one person who gave it a 7 and was like, no, man, this game is underbaked. This whole system is completely... Do you remember? I can't remember who that reviewer was.
Plaggy.
Yeah, and everyone ripped her apart.
Who is, if I'm not mistaken, has not written a single review since.
She should be given a goddamn knighthood. Like, she was one person who was willing to stand up and say, not one, but one of few, who was willing to stand up and be honest. And whilst I agree with what Jamie said, I do think that to say that the IGNs, the GameSpots, the big companies don't have the same problem. They have a different problem sometimes, and it's more usually with certain companies, certain games.
I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. I think there is something there, and I think that's illustrated every time we look at the sort of, let's say, the Metacritic for a major release, and you do get this idea of, oh, all these major publications, sometimes based all around the world, have all kind of like fallen in line a little bit. And isn't it remarkable that all these people that had the same access to the same game, theoretically in a vacuum, resulted in creating remarkably similar opinions? But a lot of that could just be because that's just the nature of the game. And I think over time what we find is that those consensuses that were formed then continue to match audience consensuses over the many years. And like, I don't know, it kind of like, I think to buy into that idea that there's this, I'm not going to call it a conspiracy theory, but there's this widespread conspiracy theory that all video game journalists at every single outlet around the world are like convening to fit together and to make sure they're all saying the right things and
like
the
they
same
have
things.
a group where they all talk and share.
It's like when you're trying to expose conspiracy theories, like the moon landing, for example, and you're like, yes, every single scientist on the fucking planet all agree to lie together. But the other thing that I find fascinating, though, about the point you made is that I think the people we're being slightly critical of from an audience and a community perspective are actually the same. Because I think the people that go to the comment section of an IGN review, and like it happened this week when just IGN gave Destroy All Humans 2 Reprobed a 6 out of 10. So it was like, this is a fine remake of an not particularly good PS2 game that hasn't got better. And people, unsurprisingly, the comments were like, IGN have given this the same as Saints Row. This guy has no idea what's going on. Destroy All Humans 2 is the absolute... I think those same people that vilified Cali Plaggy in the cyberpunk drama and absolutely annihilate websites like IGN and GameSpot are the exact same people that then go over to the more independent YouTubers on the other side. And like, I'm so glad that this guy, speaks for me. I've really found my voice through this YouTuber. When actually, what they're really trying to do is create a system where the echo chamber problem that you're talking about is that's what they want. They want IGN to think the exact same thing that they do. They want to go over to the IGN review and see that the game that they've already pre-ordered for $60 is just as good as they dreamed it would be. And so, like, it's a problem.
It's funny because everybody, though, there's an echo chamber for everything, right? There's an echo chamber for wanting a game to be good, for wanting a game to be bad, for thinking a game is good, for thinking a game is bad. The internet is so big, you can literally find a community who think every possible version of something, and then they all jump on anything that disagrees with their
the echo chamber can be useful, but not at a pre-release stage, right? Not at a point where you haven't made up your own mind. Like, if you've made up your own mind, then I don't necessarily think that there's a bad thing in seeking out your same opinion of something that you have solidified. Obviously, you should be trying to get like a different perspective, but like, let me give you an example. Okay?
But that's the problem. That is literally the problem with the echo chamber, though.
No.
It is. You have an opinion. You walk into the room on your own, and you shout, "Game is good," and then someone else walks into another door who has the same opinion and goes, "Game is good."
Yeah.
And it ends up with one big room, everyone, and then all of you are always just going to agree, yeah, game's good. Whereas there's another room next door where everyone's shouting, game is shit. To me, that's the problem with that is literally the problem with the echo chamber.
I don't necessarily...
You don't get challenged. You don't have your opinion challenged.
Yeah, look, I mean, fucking having your opinion challenged is always a good thing. Some people just can't take it, right? But I don't think that there's anything wrong per se once you've made your mind up to enter the echo chamber.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, finding a community that agree with you and then enjoying comments. I see what you mean. No, I agree with you. That's true. Yes.
If you're talking about like Saints Row, you get the game, you enjoy it, okay? Then sure, seek how people enjoy it. If you get Saints Row and you genuinely are not swayed by anything else before you play it, and you think this is a bug-ridden mess, there's nothing wrong with finding other people with that same opinion.
Sorry, I see what you mean. No, I completely agree with that. I do that with games.
That's how communities form, right?
Yeah,
like exactly. Shared opinions and
but the danger is before opinions are formed and people shape your opinion before you've had a chance to sort of out yourself.
When you have no idea.
And that all that links back to like the games industry is the only like industry on planet Earth that I can think of, certainly in terms of like the world of, media and art and stuff like that, where we have all been brainwashed to purchase arguably one of the most expensive forms of media out there before we know whether or not it's good, before we know whether or not we're even going to like it. Like you think about where we're at with like movies and music and stuff like that. With music, it's just like, I'm just going to stream an album and see if I like it. Or movies, it's so normal to like wait for reviews and read loads of reviews and read good reviews and bad reviews and then form an opinion and then ask other people if they're going. Video games were like, I know that thing's not out for 2 years, but I just gave Amazon £70 for it. And like, so by the time it comes out 2 years later, it's absolutely no, like, I don't know what the psychological name for this kind of like that reinforcement and that need for reinforcement is, but it's no surprise whatsoever that people see a 6 out of 10. They're like, my feelings are hurt, and I really need to let the IGN comment moderators know about that. Because my feelings have been hurt too.
By sending them a picture of my dick.
Yeah, exactly. and by threatening to kill the person who didn't like the product that I had already paid for because I'm an idiot.
Yeah. Well, see, I don't think in the YouTube world, or maybe more in the YouTube world, I don't think it changes people's opinions of like the reviews. I think it might just push them slightly. So
I don't know, man. I kind of get the feeling these days that the more sway that these YouTube reviewers have, I feel. Or the more prolific they get, I feel that they have a lot more sway in anything that your IGNs or GameSpots have. Like from now,
maybe. Yeah, because those things seem a lot less personal because they're not the same guy and you don't have a relationship with that guy. Yeah. I mean, they are the same people often, but they're not.
Yeah, but they're not. It's not the face of it. Yeah, it's not the face.
Exactly.
Of it.
Yeah. The GameSpot as a face is nowhere near as influential as like. I don't even know, like whoever the biggest
ACG
game reviewer is at the moment.
Angry Centaur Gaming.
I don't even know who the biggest these days would be. I did want to say one more thing because I did promise Jamie that I'd say something that'd piss him off before about this story. I question whether or not most is a bit cheeky. Most reviewers would have actually bothered to finish the whole game. Because they would have played the original, they probably played the remaster. This has come out. They probably played a few hours and are like, "Oh man, I love the visuals. I love that they've done with this. Yeah, this is Last of Us. Yeah, this is wicked. Okay, I know."
I just think that's you kind of like feeding the beast. Like I think you're feeding the troll. Like if you have your ear to the ground on this stuff, you'd know that copies of The Last of Us Part 1 have been going around for a while now. This was not a game that arrived hot 2 days ago and people had to cram a review in 48 hours. And even if they did have to, we all know that The Last of Us is a game that you can complete in a day if you really want to. I think the idea to just suggest, video game journalists being video game journalists didn't finish an 8-hour video game for their because they didn't have to. Like I just think you're just exacerbating an already very frustrating myth around people who are literally journalists. Like people who study journalism and are passionate about video games and went and got a job at a website that has a certain reputation at a certain time, and so like, I bet they didn't finish it. Why? Because they're a fucking journalist. Where if you apply that to any other field outside of video games, whether that's sport or movie, like imagine going and say, "Oh, he's a football journalist. I bet he didn't even watch the full match." Like, just
there's a difference between watching
that
90 minutes. There's a difference of watching it, but when you say like not watching a 90-minute game is not the same as playing like 20 hours or 18 or 15 hours, whatever. Like that is a lot of time investment.
That's how long The Last of Us 2 is. That's not how long The Last of Us 1 is.
I'm sure it's about 15 hours, right?
I think it's much shorter than that, but maybe I'm wrong. I can't remember, to be fair.
But also, Jonesy, you like that's the job, dude. That's what they're getting.
Of course. My question: if I would absolutely forgive them for playing. And this isn't just the journalists. I'm talking about like the YouTubers, everyone who like reviews this. If you've played 7 hours of that game and you're 75% of the way through, I would absolutely forgive them for going, do you know what? This is wicked. This is a fantastic remake.
But I love everything they've done to it.
I only finished the other one. I only finished playing the remaster.
A lot of the publications disclose that anyway.
Yeah,
disclose
the amount that they've completed.
Yeah.
Some of them for sure do. But it's the ones who don't. I do sometimes wonder if they were like, I've played most of this game. I know where it's going. I've literally played it 2 years ago. Am I really going to be bothered to do it? I've got 5 other game reviews to bash out. Like this week.
Now
have I got time?
Now that you're broadening the bracket to like anyone who doesn't disclose how long they played it for, and you've also broadened it so that you're not just talking about
I see the others
websites like IGN and GameSpot. You're talking about everyone. I hate to break this to you, Jonesy, but we fit that criteria. Probably 50% of every podcast I've ever done. How often do we disclose when we give our opinions on a game, whether or not we finished it or how many hours we played it for?
I think we nearly always do, because I always say I've played about 5 hours of it. You always go, I've completed it. And Chris says, I'm thinking about buying it.
Very
good.
much.
Literally every time we talk about a game, then we say, no, I don't. Do you think that would be? I wouldn't have a problem with that.
I just think that's one of those.
Would you have a problem if they did that?
If they're not if they disclose, well, not if they disclosed it, and it would depend what they were doing. If it was someone's job, if IGN with their tens of journalists and tens more of freelancers decided to give the Last of Us Part 1 review to a person who decided not to finish the Last of Us Part 1, I would have a problem with that. Yes. But I think also just to pluck the idea from thin air that like a journalist with a lot of work on decided not to do their job because like they're an easy target. I just don't think there's anything.
I didn't mean it as like a conspiracy though. I just meant it as like I could see that happening to a lot of people being like, I'm so fucking sad.
Maybe I'm slightly biased because it's like that classic comment of like, again, people going into a comment section of a review they don't like because a game they want to like at a school they don't like, and going, oh, I bet this person didn't even finish it. I bet it was too hard for them. Remember that one video 6 years ago where the guy couldn't even complete the Cuphead tutorial? Well, that's every video game journalist ever, baby.
There is an interesting thing here though, because you said it and I hadn't really thought about it, but. And I do sometimes think this, and Cyberpunk was the thing that made me think it, thinking about the reviews for Cyberpunk. If you finish a game and it's like a 30-hour game, the fact that you finished it kind of gives you some sort of credibility. I finished the game, I can review it. But realistically, you might have people that play that game for 100 hours. With all the side content and everything else. But if you've got a review to do, I've literally done this where I've played a game and I was doing it to review it and to capture game footage. And I just smashed through that campaign as quickly as possible because I was just capturing content. I was just trying to sort of play everything so that I could review it. And then looking back, I wouldn't say that I had anywhere near the same experience had I had if I was a fan sitting down to play it and enjoy it. So then I wonder if actually does it even matter if they finished it versus played it? Do you see what I mean?
That's why lots of outlets are very upfront about the fact that they now openly turn down invitations to the kind of those old school style review camps where the writer would have to fly out to a certain place and play a game under like very specific confined conditions and like stay there for 3 days and do as much as they can in those 3 days and then write a review. And we're not doing that to our writers. No,
right. I would just say so. The Last of Us Part 1 is 15 hours to complete, and it's 22 hours for a completionist.
Do you know what? Like, if we switch the focus from The Last of Us Part 1 back to Saints Row for a second, I reckon the overwhelming majority of people independent reviewers, independent critics who made a YouTube video about Saints Row didn't finish it. I reckon a greater
even though it's only 8-9 hour long game.
Sure. I reckon a greater proportion of quote unquote video game journalists finish Saints Row compared to YouTubers. Because I'm sure there were plenty of people out there who played 4 or 5 hours were like, I know enough about what I hate about this game to make a video about how much I hate it, and fundamentally that's my job. And then they went.
Do you ever find it weird? I find this all the time. When you finish a game and you've like played it all the way through, and then you think back to reviews that you saw, and I can't say whether it's worse for YouTubers or big outlets. I then suddenly kind of say to myself, it's actually really weird that they often only use the first third of the game to show footage from. And I always wonder if that's weird.
Yeah, but sometimes that's embargo though, dude.
Yeah.
No, there's no embargo because they don't release the review until after the game's out.
No,
there's no embargo. If you're an outlet, you release it like at a specific time.
We used to get review copies at All Time Gaming, and they always had certain like elements about what you could and couldn't show.
Yeah, like Ubisoft all the time were like, don't show the map, don't show the menus.
Maybe.
It was. Don't get me wrong. If you're releasing the review on the day of release, like I understand, but it's like it's the agreement you're making in return for getting the game early.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe, because I've often thought like that. That does strike me with a lot of games, is that then I think, why the hell didn't they? They've literally showed, and it's like a day one review, in which case you could then technically show whatever the fuck you wanted. Because even though you signed an embargo, you could technically have.
No, but like what Jamie's saying, and again, this is what happened with us. This is what happened with us at ACG is you could sign an NDA, and the review embargo will be on the day of release. But because you've signed that NDA, and the NDA has very specific things saying don't show X, Y, Z. You're contractually bound to not show X, Y, Z, regardless of. So technically, what we could have done is not signed the NDA, bought it on day one, fucking rinsed it, and then just put out whatever the fuck we wanted.
But even if you signed the NDA and said, "Okay, I won't," as long as you released it on the day of release, far enough. A number of hours after the day one release. How could they ever prove that it was a version that was an NDA version or an un-NDA version?
The NDA you're signing isn't an agreement to only like capture certain footage from that version of the game and release a video at a certain point. It's an open-ended agreement to say we are getting this copy of this game to produce this content of this nature that will include and not include these elements. So if you've signed that agreement and ultimately publish a review, it doesn't matter if like you replied and said, "Sorry, publisher, you're actually wrong because I went out on day one and bought a legitimate retail copy of the game and then captured this footage myself." It's still under the same NDA.
And then there's a merit system to it as well.
Jonesy, we signed these agreements. Like we
I've read and I've read loads of them, but most of those types of NDAs always seem to me to be earlier on in the production process. They don't seem to be the day.
They're not.
We used to.
They often are.
They were coming through our desk.
I remember having to make we didn't do reviews all time gaming, but especially with Ubisoft, a lot of the versions we'd end up getting and the NDAs we'd end up signing were for review purposes. And I remember there being stuff like, "Oh yeah, you just can't show up, can't show any of the menus and can't show the map like at all."
Yeah.
I've never read an NDA that
like
says you can't show
this.
anything from after the first third of the game. I've absolutely signed NDAs where it was like, don't show the map, don't show the menu. And I always assumed that was because they might change those elements. And
it'll be a case of like,
fixed.
Once you get to this point, we've had ones where it's like, once you get to this point. Yes.
Only in recording sessions where you go to their place, you sit down and you play a game. I've never read an NDA where it says, for a review copy of a game, where it says, do not show any of this game after this point.
What's the relevance of like that when you're talking to two people who have and are saying you're wrong?
Because I've never signed one.
You fucking have, mate.
No, I genuinely have. I've never read one that says you are not allowed to show anything that happens after this point in the game.
I don't think Jonesy would have ever had to sign an NDA for a review copy.
Yes, he would have. It's just
he wouldn't
have read it.
Oh, I always read them. I always read them every time because I'm literally.
Bro, the amount of times I put a thing under your nose and said sign this because you're playing this game and you're like, oh, cool.
I read them every time.
Clearly not.
You don't even have to read them. You don't even have to read them because they literally
You don't even have to read them.
The people will know because in the email they'll even say, "No, I always read them." But the people come over.
I don't know why you're still arguing. You're wrong.
Because it's not. No, I'm not.
This is you are categorically wrong.
You're telling me you've signed NDAs where it says even though this is a review, you're not allowed to show any footage from after. And I'm not saying they never do. I'm saying it seems very rare that
categorically, I can tell you that is just the standard thing that used to come through our desks.
I can tell you.
They might say don't show a mission, or they might say don't show this.
Don't show anything beyond this point.
Anyway, this has gone weird. Let's get back to
flipping a switch because I can tell you games and publishers where you are just wrong. Like I can tell
you still got the NDA. After this, send them to me. And I'll read it.
I don't. We don't have access to that email account. You know that.
All right. I'll find NDAs that I've got.
I can tell you
from years ago where I can send you and it doesn't say anything about don't show anything after 30% into the game.
I can tell you that Ubisoft did this all the time, and when we accepted review copies for the two that come to mind were Far Cry 5 and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, both of which I took the copy and I made the content for. We got these big PDF packs. And they would talk you through They would give you an introduction to the game, an introduction to mechanics, and they would give you an introduction to the story, and they would talk to you sometimes in very specific points, sometimes mentioning explicit mission names, sometimes mentioning chapter names. They're saying, this is the point at which we don't want you to talk about or show what happens after this.
I will make an effort to find NDAs from review copies that have been put up online and see how many of them say you can't show anything past this point in the game. Because I think you're both wrong. I think you're right in specific instances. I think you're right in specific instances. I think you're wrong on balance.
Actually insane that you're arguing with us about this.
There's a fine line between you kind of just being like adamant and you almost being insulting. Like I'm telling you.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying
things that I worked on that you didn't. Were like this was the case.
I'm not telling you you're wrong, mate. I'm saying that whenever you see reviews for stuff, I'm always struck by the fact that in no reviews, not none, but a lot of reviews, loads of them, they always seem to show footage from the first third of the game. And I've always wondered why. And I'm saying that I've never myself, the few times that I have had NDAs for review copies of games, they never say you're not allowed to show anything after 30% into the game.
You've got to stop using never. You've got to stop using never. It does happen. We have got.
I didn't say it doesn't happen.
You just
said
never.
3 times.
You used the word never.
I have never. I said I have never had one that said you can't use anything past 30% into a game. And you're saying you've always had that. So I'm saying
no, not
see
always.
Those NDAs.
Not always.
You just said you said you've always got that. You've always had it, so you can't show that.
No, not always. But the overwhelming majority of times that I can remember,
I would do
very specific guidance. Do you know what, Jonesy? Let's
move on. Let's move on.
This makes it so much better. Is I'm glad that compared to me and Chris, you have spent the exact same amount of time dealing with these kinds of things, dealing with review copies, signing NDAs, and you know what? I'm going to throw it in there. The exact same amount of time working in the fucking games industry. I'm so glad that 3 people with the exact same comparable levels of experience in this.
No, we don't. I started working in the game. I started working on game reviews in the game industry before you both did, so it's been a long time.
Even okay,
and we used to get review copies constantly all the time.
I'm going to say some shit I'll get in trouble for if we don't stop. So I suggest that we leave this.
Well, you know what? It's lucky, fellas, that we can have these arguments and we can still come back next week and make another podcast. And we can only do that thanks to the generosity of our patrons, because after arguments like that, at least 95% of our audience is switched off. So if you want to keep the camera rolling for the 5% that are still with us, then head on over to patreon.com/SuperShow and show your support. For as little as $2, you can get access to our Discord server. $5 gets you access to Patreon exclusive podcasts, shows, some archive stuff from the ATG days, and our first attempt, let's say that, at a Let's Play for The Quarry, which we have yet to record a part 2, but it's coming. It's coming. I mean, stroke it long enough, it's coming. That's all I'm going to say. And right now, on screen, you can see some names of people that have been very generous with not only their time, but their money as well. And I'm talking about Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Bill Caesar, Brimstone, Cole K, Crow's Perch, there we go, I Snort Rock Salt, Jesper Camdal Nielsen, Leo Merger, Mindful Pig, Mr. Anthropic, Nathan Piers, Pastors Guild, and the big boys, the guys that make us rock hard week in, week out. I'm talking about Brett Z, aka Shellshock, Doppler, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Reed, Manuel Guerrero, and of course the one and only Peaswad. Thank you so much to you, every single one of you. You keep the Super Show dream alive. And hey, let us have these these arguments. Whew, wow, that was good.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much to all of the patrons. Genuinely,
yes, thank you.
I would cry weekly if I didn't get to come and annoy Jamie on a weekly basis.
I'm crying weekly at just being here. So yeah.
Wow, there we go.
Great.
Oh, I told you, motivation all time low. Fellas, let's talk about some games that we ourselves have played. Maybe to completion, maybe not. Maybe only 65% of the way. Maybe just the main story and none of the side quests. So let's head on over to Alex Jones. What you been playing?
Do you know what's funny? I had to sign an NDA this week. This was for Meet Your Maker, which is we talked about briefly because it was
the Dead by Daylight guys.
Yes, it was. This was something that we sort of chatted about for. I think it was Jamie and I were chatting about because it was a asymmetrical shooter puzzler where you were.
It was all of us, but thanks for remembering that I was there.
I don't think you were there for that one. Were you there for that one?
He was.
Oh no! Now I feel bad.
Jonesy's memory fails him for the second time.
I think
in 10
I was even
minutes, go
fucking
figure.
hosting that one, but like whatever.
It's because you were the host, mate. That's why.
Just call me Lord Muck over here.
But so I played a bit of this. I played a couple of hours, and yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting concept. I think when we talked about it, so I signed up for the closed beta because I love a bit of an asymmetric game like this, and I wanted to see what it's all about. In some fashion, it's been done very well. Like it feels pretty fluid. It feels quite nice. It's a sort of perfectly fine functioning first-person shooter in a lot of ways when you are the person doing the raiding.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a weird one because from what I've played so far, I don't know how much longevity this game's got. I mean, it lives and dies on you building these puzzle rooms or puzzle buildings with grunts and things who are trying to protecting sort of like a sample of genetic material, which is effectively what you're doing. And then you raid into these areas. You try and not get killed whilst extracting genetic material. And when you're playing the game like that, it's a first-person shooter. You're running through. You're trying to take out bad guys. Traps are firing at you, and you're trying to dodge those or blow them up and survive. And the idea is that as you go into these areas, there's a path that is effectively a route through to this genetic material, which you have to retrieve and then escape with it. It's pretty basic stuff. And I can see, and some of those buildings and some of the puzzling sections are really cool, and they can effectively just end up like meat grinders where you've got shitloads of people, loads of grunts attacking you and traps going off. And the ingenuity of what some people have built is really cool and does feel quite doomy. It has got that kind of like, out of hell, demon spawn kind of feel to it that Doom's got.
Yeah.
The problem I think it has is, but you also, the other side of the game is that you get to build your own sort of like puzzle temple or whatever you want to call it.
So did you do both?
I did both. I did both. That side of it it's a way to explain it. It feels like Minecraft. It feels like Minecraft for adults who want to get a bit, because you can change the types of blocks, shapes of blocks, how they function. You can put traps and you can kind of try and be ingenious. It is quite laborious, like building the places, and it's not that engaging. I can see how some people might really get into it and just go, I've designed this incredible base that's going to be amazing. And because you get, if you kill people, when people try and raid you, if they die, you then can go to your base and you get to pick up a load of stuff that they've dropped. So the idea of building somewhere that you can farm resources from dead players is a cool concept.
Yeah.
But the problem I think it has for me is just the longevity. You're going to build a couple of these bases, you're going to do a couple of raids, and then I think you're going to struggle to see where this game, leveling up and unlocking new stuff and unlocking new ways to kill people, it's just going to get dry quite quickly. I think personally, for me anyway,
it might live and die on its discovery system. To be honest, I mean, if you think about Mario Maker, I think what worked really well there was the sense of discovery and the kind of like upvotes for particular levels and stages, etc. So I think that's probably, like, obviously you need to have the community making these cool things. I'd imagine that the developer would step in if the community doesn't kind of like fill in the gaps. But it's also a question of like, hey, are people seeing how easy is it for people to get to the best things?
I think the thing like Mario Maker, though, is I think it seems like you can have a lot more. You have a lot more freedom to kind of play with it and be a bit more like inventive and ingenious, and you can come up with all sorts of crazy concepts.
But there's no
this
real.
This is more limited.
But there's no real incentive. There's no real incentive in Mario Maker to make a good level for other people, other than like your self-satisfaction and maybe climb the leaderboards in terms of the discovery and those crazy gifts, boy. Feature on a donkey video, but like. Yeah, if there's more of an incentive to be the builder, then
you say that, cool. But I feel like there must be some weirdos out there, whether it's Super Mario Maker or Meet Your Maker or Little Big Planet, they clearly don't need that much incentive because there are always those like really strangely committed people out there who are just like, I'm going to make the best fucking levels ever for no reason.
I created Dragon Ball Z and Dreams.
Yeah, exactly. I know I'm going to make someone happy, and that's all I need.
Yeah.
And so I think this Meet Your Maker is obviously a lot more limited than that. It's more like a Minecraft system. It's built around blocks, and you can build rooms. Sure, you can build little death traps for people. There could be ways in which people can get really sort of ingenious with it, and you will get really cool things happen. But I think that is also going to rely on the developers adding in new elements and sort of seeing holes where people are saying like, "Oh, it'd be really cool if we could have this, or we could mix it up by doing that." But it's a fun idea. It's a fun concept, and it is well made. It feels well made. It doesn't feel like that the controls are bad. It doesn't feel like anything's sort of underbaked or anything like that. It's solid. It's a good time. I would say it's a fun thing to dip your toe into. Maybe just not to put your whole foot in.
Okay, fair. Because your foot will get chopped off. Fair enough.
Yes. I'll briefly mention Saints Row, which I've been playing more of. Jamie's already mentioned it multiple times in his podcast. That the more I play of that, the more sad I feel.
Wow.
And the reason is when you can feel what a game could have been.
Yeah.
But because you bump into things and you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how that would have panned out if they'd have actually had the time and the money and the inclination to follow through. I keep having moments like that where I'm just like, I feel like I'm playing. It's hard to bring it all back to editing, right? And making a video and going, this video is going to be a masterpiece. And then you suddenly realize you don't have the time, you don't have the budget, you don't have the resources. And so you make kind of an approximation of what you meant to make as a video, but it's just not as good as you'd hoped for. But some of the elements that you wanted are still there because you did have time to make certain things and do certain things.
Yeah.
But it's just not the product you wanted to put out. And that is my feeling of Saints Row at this point, which
I think that's quite an interesting kind of take on it. From the editing
it might not be fair. Sure, it might be completely unfair, but
I don't think it's unfair. Although I worry I have a slightly more pessimistic outlook on it.
Right.
Which
go
is
on. Go on then.
I have played, for example, main story missions in Saints Row that have given me the feeling that Jonesy's kind of hinting at. Like there is something here, and there are definitely ideas here, and could this have been something bigger and better and more well-rounded than it actually ended up being? But there are also times, and specifically I'm going to call out the writing, which is not a department that is traditionally as hamstrung by issues like sort of like budget and so on and so forth.
Right.
Although, hey, if parts of a level get cut, associated writing gets cut, that's obviously a given. But there were parts of it where like interesting gameplay ideas and interesting scenarios were still completely let down by writing that felt like it was unable to build upon any of those interesting ideas. And I felt like that would always have been a kind of a mark against that game, even if some of the other elements had been bigger or better or more boisterous or more fleshed out or anything like that. So yeah, like I get what you mean in that I'm seeing hints of a better Saints Row within the version of the game that we got, but it still feels like it's got that asterisk of, but it still wouldn't have been great because fundamentally these elements would have let it down or would have held it back. And writing is the thing I keep getting hung up on.
Yeah. So this is an interesting point, right? Because I was obviously listening to your rants last week, which was very enjoyable. But the issue that I had with your rant there was you were talking about like how disappointed you were, how they shouldn't have made it, because they just doesn't seem to be running out of ideas. And you did mention that there was a fundamental core element of this game that is just wrong and not working, right? But then you did carry on to say, and maybe it's just because you're trying to move on the conversation, fair enough, but you did carry on to say like, I'm sure it'll work itself out after a few updates, etc. Right? Where that kind of the way you were talking about it, as from a listener perspective at least, was almost how we were discussing Cyberpunk. How at its core, those game systems, they're not actually great, and how much can you patch in an entirely new game system? Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I'd just be interested to know like a more definitive kind of take on that.
Yeah, I can't remember what I said last week, but like let me clarify.
Yeah.
That like when this game is patched up to the gills and has no bugs and no glitches and runs as smooth as butter, it will still be a 6 or 7 out of 10 game.
That's exactly what you said last
fundamentally,
week.
Fundamentally, that's what this is. And like as you just said yourself there, Chris, like there are things that cannot be undone. And there are avenues that cannot be explored, and jokes that cannot be unwritten, and character arcs that cannot be, re-unraveled. Like there are just little things like there's one interesting quest line where you have a friend who, and Josie, I don't know if you got to this part yet, but a friend who engages in the act of LARPing, live action roleplay, and so. But it's kind of like in a potentially interesting spin rather than sort of like a fantasy Lord of the Ringsy style LARPing. It's like a post-apocalyptic Mad Maxy Fallout style LARPing where they largely do it out in the desert and they build all these big forts and stuff like that. And there's lots of a weird amount of Mad Max inspired stuff throughout Saints Row actually, but that's a kind of different story. And so there's a level where your guys kind of like, what's LARPing? Which, again, for me is just as like stupid as the whole "what are zombies" thing nowadays, because like everyone knows what zombies are. Like you can figure out what live action role playing is. Blah, blah, blah. And so he goes along with his friend and he puts on cardboard armor, and there are cool ideas dotted around this level. One of them, for example, is you are given versions of guns that are all non-lethal, and every time you shoot someone with them and do enough damage to kill them, they like feign death in a funny way. Okay. And there's this idea within the game that everyone is in on the LARPing, so even if you're going down the street and you shoot someone with a fake gun and it puts a Nerf dart in their head, they will like feign death in a funny way. And like little things like the triangle animations you can do to like the Saints Row's equivalents of glory kills, they have all been redone to do like LARPing versions of that. So like there's one where he like pretends to grab out their heart and they'll go like that. And it's like, so you've understood that there's like you've changed the parameters for how the combat works for this series of missions, and you've implemented new lines of dialogue and new animations and new ideas. But like, how have you made what's going on here like even remotely interesting, and how can you kind of like double down on this as a thought starter and take it in interesting directions, or even just turn it into humor? And it fails at that. And the key example for me was the point where you're opening a series of chests and one of them has a poster above it that says it costs $2.99 to open, and the player character goes like, why does this one cost $2.99 to open? And the other character says, oh, this is one of he's doing some stupid voices like, this is one of the old microtransactions. Thou must open thy coin purse to progress. And like, that's the end of the conversation. And it's like, there's this kind of this seed here where like someone like, oh, it'll be really funny if we used our LARPing mission series as a way to get a joke or a series of jokes or like some humor around microtransactions in there. And the people responsible for the jokes just shrugged their shoulders and were like, well, we could just reference it, right? Like we can just pick it up and then write it down and then drop it immediately. And that's the Saints Row's approach to humor seemingly throughout, which is every good idea is touched upon and immediately left.
That's interesting.
Like there's no commentary, there's no depth, there's no substance. They think that the humor is the reference rather than bringing any meat to the bone,
making a joke out of it.
Which is what leaves you with a game full of bones. And it's not just the jokes, the characters, their individual arcs, the relationship between the boss and those characters, and the journey the gang goes on as a whole. It just feels superfluous throughout. And that is a really nagging problem to have in a game where you're occasionally seeing hints of what could be fun gameplay. Like, no shit, it's fun to get in a big truck with a button that lets you flip up the thing at the front and like destroy porta potties and flip cars, like, and there are explosions everywhere. Blowing shit up is fun. Like, it's video game 101, but like, it's not enough. And it looks like shit.
Yeah, it's also got the problem that some of those ideas that should be really fun, and they sound fun, and they probably would have been fun, I think, if they'd have spent longer on it. They're not, because the execution is so ham-fisted or so half-baked. Like there's a mission like relatively early on where you steal a big like metal crate container, and you're dragging it along in a dune buggy. And you absolutely get the idea that it's supposed to be something out of like Fast and Furious, where they're dragging it down the street and it's spinning like side to side. I think there's even a mission in Grand Theft Auto, isn't there, where you do something similar, and it's like slamming into things and like blowing stuff up and all hell's breaking loose. But because it's just not very well done, you end up with this like PlayStation 3 era like stilted movement, and the crate thing doesn't really move that well, and it sort of just sticks into weird positions, and you can't like swing around a corner and slam it into a pursuing vehicle and blow them up. It just all feels a bit shit, and you end up just like going, okay, that could have been cool if you'd have spent longer on the, you know, on the physics, on the controls of how the interactions work and all of that. And yeah, and even like even just shooting people is not that fun. Jamie was saying about the where you hit triangle and you like do the finishes. They're cool, like they're fine. Like some of those are cool moments. But shooting, just like locking onto people and just shooting them in the head and then switching to someone else and then locking onto them, it just gets really old really quick.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Like, so as you mentioned, Jamie, like you got a bunch of codes for us, and I didn't take mine because I was like, I don't have time to play games. And if I do have time to play games, I'm not going to play it in something that seems like in a really bad state. But I am really curious to just try and... It's weird, right? Like, I'm curious to experience the mediocreness. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Maybe I'm assuming that it was going to be better if they'd had longer and more time. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they just didn't make a very good game.
But again, it's what we said, right? Like if the systems are just fundamentally broken or shit, then, you know, you polish your turd as much as you want, Jonesy.
Yeah, but I don't know enough about game development to know, like, is it that something better would have been implemented in that, and that was like a first iteration or a second iteration, but when they would have got to the 8th iteration, it would have been really fun. Like the whole intro section where you sort of meet the Saints, or who will become the Saints, and how they interplay and how they know each other, felt to me like they had this whole idea where they were going to have the straight and narrow mercenary, the getaway driver from a gang, a nerdy guy from, entrepreneur, and then another guy from another gang who's like this barman. And then they were all going to come together and form the Saints because of like circumstance and whatever. And in the end, it feels like they didn't have to me anyway, it felt like they didn't have time to execute all of that story. So in the end, they went, they just all know each other and live together. And it makes no sense because you get this whole section where you go and get a job as a mercenary, and you then get fired from that job because shit goes wrong and the guy's annoyed with you, so he fires you. And then there's quite a fair, funny little bit where you lie in bed and it's like, smash the button to get out of bed. And it's like, no, seriously, get out of bed now. And then he's moping around the apartment. And I'm like, that's fine.
That was Deadpool the game level comedy.
No, it was. But I'm like, that's fine to do that. But it would have made more sense to do that when you hadn't already established that you were part of this group of people that were going to go and knock over shops to steal money to pay your rent. Like, you don't give a shit about a job paying you a wage when you can just go and steal stuff. Like, why do you care about it? Just felt weird. It felt really strangely put together.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
Well, fellas, Jamie, did you have anything else in your catch-up? You said Saints Row. Have you finished Saints Row yet?
No.
Are you going to?
I'm going to try to. I've done quite a lot of it. The game has, and we haven't even fucking touched this issue yet, but the game has very frustrating structural problems where, it seems to kind of divvy up the main story missions into sort of two camps: story missions that relate to one of the other members of the gang, one of the other roommates, and kind of follow along their story paths, and story missions that relate to the gang and the progression of the gang and their battle against this group called Marshall, who are kind of like the sort of like the military, almost like a private military mercenary group that are doing security stuff around the city. And those ones, and these are how you get your criminal enterprises level up so that you get additional businesses that you can buy and increase the amount of money that you can generate per hour. They are locked off behind a certain amount of investment into criminal enterprises, and it comes in two forms. So criminal enterprises, for anyone that doesn't know, is when you spend money to buy certain businesses that you place on the map, and those businesses operate as in the narrative of the game, operate as a front that generates revenue for the Saints. But in gameplay terms, they open up side activities. So the one I mentioned last week is when you buy the fake the hospital that's a front, that's what lets you start doing insurance fraud. The game gets to the point where it's like, to unlock the ability to start this story mission, you need to have placed down 6 criminal ventures on the map and completed, so done all the associated side activities of like 4 of them. And like some of them, like
sounds like Civilization.
Civilization would probably be more fun. Like one of the first ones you do, for example, is Jim Ross, who's the mechanic. That's one of the first. It's the criminal enterprise you're given as part of the story. That has 11 steps to it, and each of those steps is you going to somewhere on a map, collecting a car, and bringing it back to Jim Rob. So if you wanted to complete Jim Rob's, you would need to do a go here, collect a car, drive it back mission 11 times. And there are points in the story where it wants you to have completed 4 businesses, 6 businesses. Now, some of them are easier than that, like insurance fraud, there's like 5 or 6 instances of it. But that's still you needing to stop and go and do 5 or 6 instances of insurance fraud and completing it to complete that criminal venture. And then also being forced to spend your money on these businesses to progress as well. And they're sometimes not cheap. Like I'm at the stage now where they're 400 grand a pop. And it's like, Christ,
which is 4 side quests in order to make the main story campaign.
So
longer.
is that like artificial padding basically, or artificial gatekeeping?
Yeah, it's ensuring that the side content is worked into the progression of the main narrative to like you said, artificially extend and prolong the experience, and probably B, make sure that people are engaging with it and are just ignoring it, which I hate that, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not quite like Mafia 3, where side content replaces main story content, for example, but I don't like that structure. I don't like that way of doing things.
No, me either.
So yeah, that's, and basically to go back to your original question, that's slowing me down, but it ain't stopping me, buddy. But otherwise, I'm just kind of like keeping things ticking along. Like I'm still haven't completed Roller Drome, still haven't completed Midnight Fight Express, few kind of bits and pieces like that. There's a couple of like Immortality just came out on Game Pass. I do want to check that out. And hey, knowing me, I'm enough of a moron that you'll probably speak to me on Monday, ask me how my weekend was, and I bought The Last of Us. So because I'm a fucking
and then we can
idiot.
ask you if it's worth it again.
Yeah, and I'll say,
is it worth it?
And I'll say I've completed it. It was amazing, not worth it.
Well, there we go. You know what is worth it? The gift that keeps on giving. Elden Ring, fellas. I've managed to carve out some time in my fucking ridiculous few weeks that I've had. I've knocked off a big chunk of that game. I'm fairly happy. Not much more to say about that, but it does kind of bring to mind the fact that Sony and Tencent have increased their stake in From Software. So we'll see what happens with them in the future. But that was the only gaming that I did in my time away. I did watch some stuff. Okay, I watched Bullet Train in the cinema, which was that's a fun time. That's a fun time, any which way you slice it, and I can highly recommend it. And I hope, as a summer blockbuster, which studios are wont to do, they hardly ever look at them as one-offs. And I think like the world that they've created there is interesting enough that I would love to see a Bullet Train 2 in whatever form it takes. Maybe like, fucking Steam Train or something. I don't fucking know.
It's a prequel all about Bad Bunny.
Hey, let me say, he was actually quality in this film, man. I like props to him.
One of the things I read, genuinely, is that in like screen tests and like with testing audiences, the studio were so happy with the Bad Bunny's performance and how audiences were responding to him that they fast tracked him becoming like he's going to be like an MCU character soon. Like wow. There's some weird thing where it's like there's some like South American, some obscure South American Marvel character that he's going to like. Yeah. Basically.
How long before they change his name back to what his real name is and stop calling him Bad Bunny?
What is his? I'm going to find out what his real name is.
Like they did with The Rock.
Oh, they could easily. His name is Benito. I'll skip out all the middle names. Benito Acacio.
It's Benito Bad Bunny Acacio, and then they just drop.
Yeah, Acacio Cortez. Bullet Train is quality film. Go check it out. Like it at times it feels quite relentless. Because it's like
I heard it was shit.
Oh, it's so
is
good.
It not shit?
It's mate, okay. Like if you go in there expecting cerebral bullshit, then yeah, it's shit. But if you go there like thinking this is an absolute fucking ham-fisted, weird, fucking balls to the wall kind of film that is more than occasionally funny, then yeah, you have a good time.
So leave your brain at the door.
Yeah, pretty much. Popcorn movie, but Yeah, it's fun, man. Like, it's really fucking cool. What else have I been watching? I watched the first episode of House of the Dragon. Okay. For my sins, I thought, you know what? People are chatting about it. Let me just kind of jump in. I was a Game of Thrones fan. Okay. I even liked the last season. I didn't like the ending of the whole thing, but, you know, there were elements in the last season that I really enjoyed. I don't know if it's a controversial take or not, but I'm kind of over it, fellas.
Huh.
Yeah,
Really?
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's just
like over it as in like next episode drops, you're not even gonna.
I mean, the next
jump
episode
in?
has dropped and I haven't watched it.
Oh right, I see. Wow.
I think I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't know. I think the things that I enjoyed about Game of Thrones doesn't seem to be present in House of the Dragon, right? So,
Oh, wow, okay.
So I was less about that like political intrigue and backstabbing element of Game of Thrones and like the shock value. Like if you want shock value, just fucking watch The Boys. It's infinitely better. But what I liked about Game of Thrones was kind of like the mysteries around it and the White Walkers and what all that fucking meant. And that was something that was established from the first episode, right? And that's kind of the thing that kept me along going with the fucking political intrigue and the backstabbing and stuff.
I'm quite happy with you said that because I was the opposite with Game of Thrones. Like, I didn't really care about the White Walkers, so actually I might quite enjoy House of the Dragon.
Then you'll fucking love this. But yeah, I just kind of like...
I got annoyed when it went all dragony and it went all like...
Oh, well, mate, this is called the House of the
and-
Dragon. Like,
Oh yeah, but the whole thing is like, you know, no. I mean, when it just became like a spectacle rather than sort of like the not like shock factor stuff, but like the Red Wedding and you know this person then assassinated that person and that person got with that person. And you saw stuff. Oh, I didn't expect that, and it was like the intrigue and stuff. I thought was really interesting with Game of Thrones.
yeah,
It's where that stuff all disappeared that I kind of got bored with it.
yeah, I don't know.
And you
like,
end up with that shocker that was the final season.
yeah, I was kind of like I was very bored in that first episode of House of Dragon. And to be fair, it's the first fucking episode. Like, you know, you can get bored in first episodes of things.
Yeah.
But I just like...
But they should do enough to keep you wanting, to make you want to come back, though. The fact that they haven't even made you want to come to the second episode is pretty dire.
I just don't know if so I started Game of Thrones. Initially, I was reluctant. I got into it. Then I read all the books, and I was really into the books. I really enjoyed the books. I didn't read the expanded book stuff, which like House of the Dragon is partly based on, or whatever it is. But yeah, just something about this. I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care about any of this shit. Like, why am I watching this? Boring. Who cares?
Wow.
Oh, that person's gonna backstab that person. Oh, okay, they're gonna rape that woman. Okay, yeah, cool. Oh, they cut this baby out of that. Oh, cool. Whatever. Like, who cares? Gives a shit. And I find another thing. And this is just me being me. I find that actor Matt Smith to be really fucking weird looking in like a way that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Oh right. I find him weird looking in like a actory way, which like it doesn't actually distract me.
Yeah, fair enough. But yes, that's House of the Dragon. Yeah.
Well, it was one less problem you're going to have now, Chris, is you're not going to have to watch House of the Dragon and Rings of Power at the same time.
Oh mate, Rings of Power. Hopefully it's going to fare better.
It's supposed to be better. Anecdotally.
I'm well up for that, and I believe it's launching with 2 episodes. By the time you listen to this podcast, it would have been out. So yeah. Anyway, and the other thing I want to say is I watched some esports, fellas, because I am a esports enjoyer, as it were. I watched the ESL Genting, which I believe is in like the Philippines or some shit like that, and my boys OG fucking won it. So you know,
Wicked.
Yeah,
Nice.
Exactly. You guys are right there with me
Well done.
in my excitement of it.
I watched some regular sports and my boys Chelsea didn't.
Well, there we go. Yeah.
So
I feel the same way as Jonesy feels about my Dota thing. But yeah, no, always good to come and watch some esports. It's just a fun time. It's leading up to the international fellas, so it's a good time to be a Dota fan.
What does the word genting mean?
Genting is like the area, the location.
Okay. I thought it was like a hip way of saying it's a generational thing. It's a genting.
I wish I was more into esports. I wish I was more into normal sports, but I can't be bothered.
Fair enough. Oh, dude, like I feel you. I am like, for some reason, there are not 24 hours in a day as I experience them. Maybe, like how they say like dogs are like 1 year equals like 7 years. Maybe like with all of this, all of this stuff that I've been doing where it's like, oh, I'll watch something at 2 times speed, whatever. I just experience time differently, and there's like maybe 5 hours in a day. That's what it feels like to me. And you just can't cram it all in.
My piece of advice would be watch 3 hours less Seinfeld every day. Seinfeld.
Yeah. Stop rewatching old episodes.
Yeah,
I tried to watch
Seinfeld
it
a long time ago.
I tried to watch Seinfeld because Chris said about, because it's really good, you should. And I was like, yeah, I used to watch it and think it was quite funny. I couldn't get through it. I couldn't watch like one episode.
Wow.
It's just because it's dated, I guess.
It's very
and
dated.
I was never that connected.
Oh yeah, like they have whole things about like, oh, I got to run into this woman's apartment because I have to listen to my voice messages on,
Like, it's like it's like them in a wash like a laundrette or whatever you call it, and like stuff like that. And you're just like, okay,
some weird stuff.
This is old.
Anyway, fellas, you know what? It's a momentous occasion because we got our first super chat.
We did.
It's fucking momentous. We got our first super chat from none other than a friend of the show, Oddman Nunez, who wanted to say, "I missed you guys. Always good to catch up." Catch you all on Fridays. And Oddman, I mean, it's not a two-way kind of thing, but we're glad that you catch us on Fridays as well. And it is a good time, and we miss you too. I remember Oddman kind of like chirping up in the ATG stream days, right?
Yeah, shout out Oddman. He's an OG of OGs.
OG of OGs. But yeah, thank you very much, Oddman, for that super chat. And there's another comment that we've got, which is the comment of the week, which is from the radio guy online, a guy just quite clearly associated with the finest in internet radio, talking about PaisleyRadio.com. Listen to us Thursdays, 10 p.m., repeats on Mondays. And the radio guy online says, "Evening legends, I've gone back to a 2017 game, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands. It's not aged well with its graphics, but its story and map are great. Was wondering what game or games from 2017 would SuperShow legends go back and play and recommend?" A good kind of question. I wish I was a little bit better prepared to know what came out in 2017.
Jonesy and I did this earlier. Turns out every fucking good game ever came out in 2017. So there is no shortage of options.
Yeah, it really wasn't that long ago either. Like, they're games that I don't even think of it as like going back.
Wow. Actually, fucking 2017 is stacked. Okay, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, easy recommendation. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, easy recommendation. Horizon Zero Dawn, you guys liked it.
There's a sequel.
Yeah. So. Near Automata, fucking baller. Little Nightmares, Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, Neo, What Remains of Edith Finch, Cuphead, Prey. Fucking hell.
Super Mario Odyssey.
Odyssey comes with. I'd go Cuphead. If I had to pick a couple, I'd say Odyssey and Cuphead were two that sort of, I would say, jump out. Still, to this day, you can just sit down and have a little blast and go.
Okay, but maybe we can't go. We shouldn't go for the obvious ones. Okay, so I'll throw out Divinity: Original Sin 2 if you're into your RPGs. What can I? PUBG. When was the last time you played PUBG, fellas?
Could you even play it anymore? Can you still play PUBG?
Mate, PUBG is massive.
Is it still massive?
It is still massive.
Yes, okay. just it's Valorant massive, Jonesy, which is like you're just because something's not big in the country you live in.
Nothing.
Okay. How about
Valorant
this?
Massive.
The best Assassin's Creed game, Origins. Play that one.
I will also say Assassin's Creed Origins. Pretty sure recently kind of came to Game Pass across the board.
Sorry, I'm getting confused. Was Origins in 2017? Wasn't
no,
it?
Origins was 2017.
Okay, I'm thinking of Odyssey, which is the best Assassin's Creed.
Do you want to know how I remember Origins came out in 2017?
Because you signed an NDA?
No, actually, I didn't. We didn't get a review copy of Origins, but we did get a copy of Origins just as like a... just to give it.
Okay.
Origins, Super Mario Odyssey, and Wolfenstein: The New Colossus all came out on the same day. Most of us being, operating on a shoestring budget and just being sensible human beings, look at a situation like that, like, I'm going to invest in one of these games. And I decided that I was going to invest in Super Mario Odyssey, picked up Super Mario Odyssey, very happy with my purchase, went home that day, smile on my face.
Very good game.
Played one of the best games of that year. Because it wasn't my turn, quote unquote, in terms of when we get sent less than 3 copies of a game, we obviously have to have like a rota of sorts to who's going to get it. Jonesy was the recipient of the all-time gaming copy of Assassin's Creed Origins, and I said, you know what, fair enough. Like, it's Jonesy's turn, fair is fair. Jonesy's going to go away and he's going to go and play Assassin's Creed Origins. Turns out Jonesy's progress through Assassin's Creed Origins was stilted by the fact that about 2 days later, he just went out and bought, at a time at which I couldn't afford it, Wolfenstein New Colossus. It
wasn't 2 days. It was longer than 2 days.
I tell you what, I don't care how many days it was. It was long enough that you didn't even bother finishing Assassin's Creed Origins.
I didn't finish it.
To this day, you dirty
enjoyed
dog.
Enjoyed it. Good game. Didn't finish it.
Assassin's Creed Origins is like free with Amazon Prime, like literally as of today as well. So
it's on. I think it's on Epic free as well at the moment.
Nice.
Yes, that's a really good game to go and play.
Yeah,
Jamie, maybe you can go and pick it up.
I do need to recount my statement though.
I bought and played that game in the end when I could afford it, because you know what, Jonesy? I play video games.
Wow. There we go.
My problem isn't that I don't play them. My problem is I try and play every single one that comes out, and it doesn't work.
And my problem is I just don't play any. So
yeah.
There we go.
So, hey man, life gets in the way. Life happens.
Some other shout outs. Snipper Clips on the Switch is a great game. Nice little puzzle game. God, what else?
I've got another one.
Yeah, but try and do like non-obvious ones. And if you say Mass Effect Andromeda, you're a fucking troll.
No, I was going to say like a game that technically came out in 2017, but is still just as big and relevant and full of content now as ever. Destiny 2.
Yeah, fair.
Why not? It's free to play as well.
Fucking corporate shill.
It is.
But yeah, I'm surprised at how fucking stacked 2017 was. Actually,
it was a ridiculous year, wasn't it? I'm still going through trying to see anything that jump out. I was like, oh, that's
like Hollow Knight came out in 2017 as well. It's like, you know, it's mad.
It was a good time.
Oh,
it was a good time.
I think there's a couple of Telltale games that came out that year. Shout out to Telltale. I love a bit of Telltale.
Why don't you go fuck yourself?
But what's interesting about 2017?
No, I love them now. They're my new favorite, games company. This is what Jamie said. Over the next couple of weeks, months, I'm going to ingratiate myself as a Telltale fan because they're currently making a Star Trek game.
Wow,
gone full circle.
Gone full circle. Look, with a lot of those, obviously came with the launch of
Enter the Gungeon. Enter the Gungeon was
good. Enter the Gungeon was very good. In 2017, a lot of those games came with the launch of the Nintendo Switch, right? And talking about the Nintendo Switch, fellas, we're probably overdue at this point a proper Nintendo Direct, don't you think?
Yeah, it kind of feels like it. Yeah.
What was the last one? Was like the Nindies bullshit that they had. And it was like,
I can't wait until they actually release some new. Talk about some new games that are coming to the Switch. That would be amazing.
Jonesy, I think you're shit out of luck in this one because I think what this Nintendo Direct is going to be all about kind of like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess coming to the Switch. HD ports, as it were, or like, I guess I can't say 4K because it's not fucking 4K. Even saying HD is maybe a stretch. But yes, on a podcast, Mike Minotti and Jeff Grubb said that they were very, very sure that a Direct is being announced that would have Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports for the Switch. Now, I've got a big soft spot for Twilight Princess, only for about half of the game. And then by that point, I remember it's a more traditional Zelda game, and then I get pissed off with it and stop playing it.
Right, how much is it going to cost, Chris? Is it going to be worth it? That's what I want to know.
It's going to be, it's Nintendo, dude. It's going to be a full price. Will it be worth it?
A GameCube game that was already made into an HD version for the Wii U, which is now coming to the Switch as an HD version, will be full price, and none of the Nintendo fanboys are going to make a peep about whether or not it's worth the price tag.
Well, that's the power of Nintendo, buddy.
Yeah, they've it's like a cult. You're in.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Part of me hopes that if it's full price, they do Wind Waker and Twilight Princess packaged together, like they did with the Mario games last year or whenever that was. But I don't know.
Oh, yes, there's fucking Superstars one, yeah. That'd be cool.
Which was that was controversial in its own right. But yeah.
Yeah, because they did Skyward Sword, right?
Yeah, they did. Which, but then, yeah,
Was that full price though? I think it was.
it probably was. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm enough of a sucker that I would really. I feel like I would like to play Wind Waker again. So I think I would buy either that as a standalone product or this as a bundle. Probably in just classic Nintendo sucker kind of style. And I think I'd happily play Twilight Princess as well. That's one I never really jived with. Chris,
Twilight Princess is a good one. Yeah.
Which hand do you reckon Link is going to hold his sword in this one?
It's a good question. It's going to have to be his right if they add any kind of like one-to-one motion like they did with Skyward Sword, then
Do you remember that,
Twilight Princess was that game where it's like, you can wiggle the Wiimote and Link will swing his sword and go, ah!
It was, but it was also a GameCube game.
Yes, it was also
it was the GameCube, yeah. Nintendo are amazing. How do they do this? How do people get so annoyed with Sony and Xbox and look what they're doing and remasters, remakes, and then Nintendo just go through the roster of a game of games from like 15, 20 years ago and just keep pumping out the same game. And then they do it like it's a new thing. Like we should all be impressed and we should all go, well done. Well done. You've brought same game again for the third time.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. And I think like we'd be hypocritical to kind of like lay it on Naughty Dog and The Last of Us Part 1 and not lay it on here. I think it depends on the value proposition, right? Like if we talk about the Super Mario Collection, like that was a good value proposition.
I'm not criticizing the value. Like again, it's a value thing. If it's worth it to you, fair enough. You can go and buy it. But come on, Nintendo. Like seriously,
right? Nintendo they marched to the beat of their own drum. Like they always have.
When we talked about The Last of Us, we talked about the pricing. I said they probably just set it at the highest price they think they can sell it for, and that's all Nintendo do as well. If someone told you jars of your piss were worth 50 quid on the open market, you wouldn't sell it for 20.
That's true. It's true. It's okay. I was gonna Matt, that's too far. I won't say that. Wow. Maybe that sounds bad. But I don't know. At this point, is it just because we're so short of first-party content for the Nintendo Switch that any crumb from the table, we're like, oh, amazing, I'm excited.
No, because if you think of it that way, Jonesy, then actually, like, look at the PS5. Like, there's a fucking drought on the PS5 compared to the Switch.
I mean, one of the best games of all time is coming out in 2 months. Let's not forget that much. So they've got that going for them.
No, not according to Alex Jones.
They do have that going for them.
That game's not coming out this year.
February. I can't remember the day. I can't remember what day I said.
I love it. Like it'll be the day of release, and Jones will be like, "Yeah, February. Mark my words."
Yeah.
I think I said February 9th. I
I don't know if the PlayStation situation feels like a drought. I think like. I might get in trouble for saying this. Like, I think Game Pass kind of obscures this a lot, but Xbox are in a far worse situation, and like Starfield skipping town, left them like with their hands in their pockets for another winter, which is like a crazy thing to think about. But then, like, I think the best way of putting it is that none of the big three are doing a particularly good job of like hitting constant home runs in the first party field. The Switch, the Nintendo have been there recently, but they have not been there this year.
Yeah.
With a few, there are always exceptions, and the reason there are always exceptions is because when Nintendo do kind of step up to the oki, they've usually got something pretty good. And even if it's like not a good thing for everyone, like that Kirby game, it's kind of got this infectious of nature around it, which is that like 2/3 of us didn't buy that Kirby game. But like we all still recognize it as this really good, really well made, like cool thing. Yeah. And that's an order.
Kirby was cool. No, I'll give you Kirby was cool. I like Kirby. I thought Kirby was a fun game. I'm not trying to like have a go at them, but like I think more of that. Like Kirby was wicked. More of that.
They've also got like Pokemon's still set this fall. Splatoon is coming out this month. Bayonetta 3 is going to be a big deal. So like Nintendo do have some stuff, but
Yeah.
It's just every time they do this stuff, I'm always like,
Yeah.
I'm always kind of, because it's the way as well that they release it. During the Nintendo Directs, they'll have a trailer for like an HD remake of, of Wind Waker, and then that'll stand side by side with a brand new trailer for a wicked game that everyone wants to play. And it just feels a little odd because they kind of give it this, they feels like they give it almost the same time, like the same amount of reverence.
Yeah,
which seems a little odd.
Because most likely the fucking Wind Waker HD remake for the Switch is going to outsell whatever the new thing is that they've put out.
Maybe Jamie said he'd happily play Wind Waker.
Yeah. Look, I think it's a cycle that more companies would engage in if they could, but it relies on a number of different things. It relies on making unbelievably good games to begin with, having an extreme amount of patience with where and when you port those games to, how you price those games in like subsequently over as many years go by, and like how you maintain a feeling of, or like a positivity, or like I mentioned before, an aura around a franchise. And the fact of the matter is that like part of the right Nintendo have almost earned to do what they're about to do with Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, and apparently Metroid Prime as well, has to do with how they almost like the job they did to begin with, and how they protect those franchises in the subsequent years.
But what makes it so different to what Naughty Dog are doing, though? Like, why? Fine,
Well, it's not a ground up remake, is it? It's just it's an HD remaster of a old game.
Yeah, but if they're still releasing it for full price, though, like,
which is much worse, arguably, than a ground up remake of a game. They're effectively just releasing a game they already released for the Wii U, and they're just putting it out. I don't know if it's exactly the same. I don't know if it's a remaster.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, man. Like,
I think there is like a je ne sais quoi to the Nintendo factor, and like it's almost like good Nintendo games are stored in a different part of the brain to good games from other companies. Sometimes it's genuinely what it feels like.
Yeah.
Where like
it's almost like every game for them every Nintendo game is like a Skyrim, where they can just pump it out to every possible platform because everyone just wants to play it more and more and more and more, and they just get to do it.
And don't get me wrong, like there is a limit to it, but like I don't think that many, like these are weird examples because like not that many people owned a Wii U. Very few people, I'd imagine, play Twilight Princess and Wind Waker on that console. And so what you're really then talking about is games that are like, in the case of Wind Waker, almost 20 years old. Twilight Princess, obviously, slightly less so, and heavily associated with positive feelings around very unique consoles. In the case of Twilight Princess, the launch of that console, when you're talking about the Wii.
The Wii. That was my first game on the Wii. Twilight Princess. So
yeah,
I
exactly.
do have a firm
and so like there are positive feelings, there are positive emotions, and they're just like, yeah. So I don't know.
Maybe I think you hit on a point then, actually, to be fair, which is something I often don't consider, which is when it comes to the Wii U, they maybe think, oh, it was the right game, it was the wrong time, because not enough people had the Wii U, and now we have a much more ubiquitous console in the Switch. The SNES.
Some of the
Switch,
big,
so let's just relaunch everything.
Some of the biggest games on the Switch thus far are Wii U ports that you just you don't consider Wii U ports.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Okay, can I hit you up with some timings, okay?
Yeah, sure.
Legend of Zelda Wind Waker came out in 2002. Okay. Then there was an HD remake in 2013 for the Wii U. All right. Mm-hmm. Twilight Princess on the Wii came out in 2006. Twilight Princess HD, again for the Wii U, came out 2016. Okay. The original Last of Us on the PS3. When did that come out?
2013.
2013. And then
2014.
2014 for the remaster. So it's like, at least with the HD remakes of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, like it's fucking with the same kind of like time frame. Interesting.
Yeah.
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 And like that, there are still loads more games that people apply. Like if you go in forums where people are like, there's this feeling around this alleged direct that we're on the precipice of, that it's like, oh, this is where they're doing a lot of like remasters, and they're doing a lot of shit that's like came out on the GameCube. As I said, Metroid Prime's name has been thrown around in there.
Yeah.
You go on forums, and what you find is not people, bemoaning like the direction Nintendo are going in, or the existence of these products. It's people adding to the list of other games they want to get the same treatment. And you go in there and you see like Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door, and you see like Eternal Dark, like other classic GameCube classics. People say, do this as well. Like that, and that's just the.
I can understand it from the GameCube thing, because I think a lot of the problems that people had with Last of Us Part 1 is saying like it's too soon, and why is it needed? Whereas you talk about something from like GameCube era, you could say like, yeah, you know what, that is ripe for a remaster on the current gen console.
Yeah,
you know?
and
I find sorry, mate, go on.
I was going to say, and do you know what? Like, 15 to 20 years is probably that really nice sweet spot, because we talk about Naughty Dog, we talk about them getting a bit of like shit for what they're doing with The Last of Us and the timescale that's played out on. But what was the other franchises that Naughty Dog worked on? One of them was Crash Bandicoot, which went away for so long that people became desperate for Crash Bandicoot again. They were up in arms for Crash Bandicoot. When Crash Bandicoot came back, what form did it come back in? A remake of the original trilogy. Did people love it? Yes, they did. What did Naughty Dog work on after that? Around 20 years ago at this point, Jak and Daxter. What does shitloads of people online want more of? Like games like Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper that are now entering that 15 to 20 year range where like, man, I really want the things that I'm nostalgic for to come back again. I think it's just a time frame thing. I'm not, and don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that in 2033 there's going to be an uproar and people want the fourth version of The Last of Us. Yeah, things you play in your childhood or are integral parts of your life or your adolescence or whatever thing it is, like they can stick with you. And I think that becomes less poignant when you're an adult. And I think a lot of the people considering buying The Last of Us Part 1 on PlayStation 5 were adults or thereabouts when The Last of Us came out in 2013 or 2014.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. It's an interesting one.
Food for thought.
Double standards, if anything. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is a bit of an odd one, okay? Because we're entering this era of like, or this time of the year where everyone's kind of setting up their, all their remaining announcements for the year, right? So we've had Gamescom, we've had E3, well, not E3, the Summer Games Fest, etc. And now we're looking at like Tokyo Game Show, okay? We're looking at Nintendo Directs. We'll probably get like Sony State of Plays. Like these things are happening. We're going to get Game Awards at the end of the year, which will have some more kind of like reveals. But talking about Tokyo Game Show, Konami has said that it will announce a new game from a series, quote unquote, loved around the world at the Tokyo Game Show. Now, when one thinks of Konami, there are a few kind of franchises that stick out, right? And many of them have been long rumored to be gestating. I'm talking about Silent Hill, fellas. So could we see a Silent Hill? Is there a possibility that they would do a Kojima-less Metal Gear or maybe a Castlevania? Speculation is rampant that it could be that, but some people are kind of dispelling those rumors of those three titles in particular.
Yeah. Like it was a weird back and forth, wasn't it? Where I think it was VGC that first reported like, hey, just so everyone knows, we've heard that apparently it's none of these big three franchises. And then Andy Robinson, who is like the editor-in-chief of VGC, tweeted the day afterwards. He's like, I know I wrote that article saying it won't be any of these three things, but I've since heard from some other people that apparently like these three things are not as far away from what we thought was possible as I first imagined. Not necessarily as a part of TGS, but potentially soon TM.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the thing, okay? If I think of Konami, like, they're not talking about another iteration of fucking eFootball, okay?
Maybe they are.
Maybe they are. Are they talking about a Yu-Gi-Oh? Like, okay, sure, fine, maybe. Are they talking about a Bomberman?
Honestly, Bomberman's not a bad shout. Like, if I had to make it, I don't want to like rain on any parades too early, but if I had to make a guess at what's going on here, I think this specific TGS announcement about a series loved around the world will be a Bomberman-esque announcement, but I do wholeheartedly believe that a project, if not projects, are in the works across all three of Silent Hill, Metal Gear, and Castlevania, and I think we're going to hear about at least one of the Silent Hill projects before the end of the year.
Hopefully. I mean,
that's my guess.
It's either that, or if I am allowed to look in my crystal ball, because I have a list here of products from Konami, and seeing as everyone's kind of getting into the most recent remasters, like remastering recent games, I'm fully expecting PES 2018 Mobile to be,
you got to recognize the greats, right?
Absolutely. It's either that or Metal Gear Survive 2.
Do you know what? I was doing the same thing. I was looking through the games they put out, and I think you're both wrong. I think I know exactly what game they're bringing out. I loved around the world. It's Frogger.
It's time, baby.
It's time for Frogger. Frogger's time is now.
Frogger Part 1, built from the ground up for PlayStation 5.
Jesus.
With brand new AI.
I'll tell you what I'd absolutely fucking love is if they did another Zone of the Enders.
Man, that would be cool. Would it bother you that, again, we talk about Kojima-less Metal Gear, does a Kojima-less Zoe raise any red flags?
I think as long as they get the right person for it, I think it's fine.
So it's just someone crazy and Japanese, is what you're saying.
There's a weird thing here, though, because if they did make if it was a Metal Gear, for example, and it was great.
What if it's the rumored Metal Gear remake?
Yeah, I think that every Metal Gear project for the foreseeable, at least at the moment, I think everything's a remaster or a remake.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It would be interesting, though, to see them actually go, do you know what? Fuck it. We own the IP for this. We're going to put out.
I mean, they did that.
No, but they tried it, but it was shit. But what if they put it out? What if they did it and it was good? That would be that would sort of start on a brand new era, a brand new bringing on IP. It would be weird.
I don't think they could. I'll be honest with you. I don't think they could ever release anything that would be seen as being good. Like objectively, it could be amazing, but I think subjectively, there's way too much Kojima baggage there.
People would think it's not authentic or something.
Exactly. I think they're caught between a rock and a hard place, between where if you make something that is actually like a Metal Gear-ass Metal Gear game, then you'll be accused of essentially plagiarizing or ripping off the Kojima style, but trying to emulate that without having that. And I think if you go in the other direction, then you'll be accused of tearing out the heart and the soul of what made that franchise what it was.
It's a zero win. Yeah,
I agree.
Oh, how would you feel, Jamie, especially about a ground up remake of Metal Gear Solid 1, but third person, like proper, Resident Evil style, proper full remake?
It would depend. I don't know.
I've broken him.
No, but because the weird thing is, I never played the original Resident Evil 2 or 3, and so I don't know firsthand how much was changed and how much creative license was taken in changing those environments to make more sense from that perspective. What I do know is that if you change the camera position of Metal Gear Solid and kept the environments the exact same, that's a very weird game, and it makes it's a game that makes no sense from a stealth perspective.
It's absolutely I played the original Resident Evils, 2 anyway, and then playing the remake was incredible. And I played the original Metal Gear Solid when it came out and thought it was fantastic. I think a third person, but you're right, they would have to change some elements. Yeah, I think it could be absolutely incredible again. I would love to play that game.
I just think that so many elements. It's weird to think about how much the perspective of Metal Gear Solid impacts the way that game is. But so many things need to be reworked. So many boss fights need to be reworked.
Right.
The Vulcan Raven boss fight needs and there are elements
when you could see them, when you could literally see where they were, it would be completely different because you're they're there.
Yeah. There are fascinating fundamentals of that game that would have to be completely redone, and that's Yeah, good luck to whoever takes that on, I guess.
But it's weird in a sense because whilst that would be then true to the, that if they kept everything the same with regard to like the story beats and what you actually did in the game, but they changed the perspective, it'll be interesting to then, because arguably they don't have to do anywhere near as much work, right? They need to fix some issues like we're saying, but I don't think you necessarily need Kojima to it's almost like doing a screen adaptation, right, from a book. You don't need the author to be there to do that. You just need someone who can translate one camera angle and one type of gameplay tweak to another.
Yeah,
I think that would be much more favorable to people than, like we were saying, creating a whole new game in that series. I think they could do it and it would be amazing, but I don't think maybe they would be brave enough to be fair.
I don't think Konami give a shit about like being brave. I think they'll do whatever makes them money.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
They just too much credit. I don't care.
I think Metal Gear Solid 1 is probably the more apt kind of.
I can't see them remaking that game though.
Why not?
Like
Metal Gear Solid.
Metal Gear Solid. I can't see them just doing like a remaster or a remake where it's the same perspective and stuff though. Because I think people would look at that and go, wow, is this how this game actually was?
Yeah. I don't see why not.
It would feel like with Resident Evil, it would feel like if they did Resident Evil 2 and then they just did a remaster or a ground up remake, but in exactly the same style, just updating textures and stuff. I think people would go, I'm not playing that. I'm not playing a 1990s game that's just been made to look a bit more flashy. I don't know. It's funny, we talk about Nintendo. I can see Nintendo players buying Zelda games and doing that and being happy. I can't see people on other platforms doing it. Yeah. Someone with a PlayStation 5 playing like Metal Gear Solid. Or it's the same to me as if you said to me, what about somebody who played Grand Theft Auto 2 on their PlayStation 5, but they'd redone the graphics, but it was the same perspective? I'd be like, no, why would anyone play that? Yeah. Maybe I'm being unfair. I just think it's really weird.
It's a fair point. I think you're touching back on that, like, as Jamie said, that je ne sais quoi about Nintendo.
Nintendo, yeah.
But look, with regards to Nintendo, I've got to say, we will know because that Nintendo Direct is reportedly going to take place September 12th. And with the Konami thing, we'll know September 16th. So,
not too long.
Yeah, I wonder, Jamie, like, what would they need to do to make you cream?
Dance Revolution.
I mean, I'm a Metal Gear guy. I'm not a Silent Hill guy, right? And so I don't think the Metal Gear stuff is ready. The ultimate answer to that question is the one thing that for some reason never even gets rumored, and it's such a weird one because in theory, I know it's a complicated game and it's seemingly a taller order than it's made out to be online. But the one thing they have never done, and I do not get it, let us play Metal Gear Solid 4 literally anywhere, in any shape, in any form, other than an actual PlayStation 3. Because even emulators don't run MGS4 particularly well right now, unless you have like it's improving all the time, and the better rig you have, the better results you get. But like, it's extraordinary to me that game is still such an important part of that series and such an important piece of the puzzle. And it's still like you just can't play anywhere really.
What if they just straight up did like, hey, Super Mario like All Stars? What if they did that with like 1 to 4?
Oh, then it'd be remarkable, a revelation. Like create. They did a respectable job. Less so recently. Less so like in the last the generation or two, but they did over time did a respectable job of trying to. In fact, I've just realized something as we're saying this. They already remade Metal Gear Solid. It was called the Twin Snakes. I completely forgot about it for the entirety of this conversation. So like, and that there was a collection on the PS3 that had everything up to 4. There was a collection on 360 that had everything other than 4. They've done console ports of Peace Walker, which was a PSP title. Like, there have been hints from Konami that they're willing to try to make this series as accessible and as readily available as possible. I think some of those games have even been on Game Pass before, like on Xbox. But I think there's still room for like you're talking about one fell swoop where they're like once and for all, here are all these games and the way that you can play them on hardware that's relevant to audiences today. And the big one, the thing that just never seems to budge is MGS4.
Yeah,
that's what
it's either going to be that, or they're just going to announce a brand new game, which is Metal Gear Acid 3.
I mean, it's time, right? Like everyone, hey, guess what? PSP exclusive. I hope your battery hasn't exploded because you're gonna have to fish that bad boy out.
Yeah. What if, because that they other insiders have said that they've been teasing Metal Gear Solid for Metal Gear related news, but they haven't mentioned if it's gaming or not. What if it's our first taste of the trailer for the movie? Ooh.
I mean, a trailer would require the movie to start filming. I'd be very impressed if they managed to cook one up. Maybe it's like a CG.
That's what Kojima's been cutting.
Yeah,
that's what Kojima's been editing.
True, actually, we still don't know what Kojima was editing.
He was just editing the trailer for his fucking podcast.
No, he was. No way. Not that trailer. Like, it was him sat there.
Yeah.
I saw that edit timeline. There was more shit going on.
Yeah, there was no editing in that. It was just him. I don't know, man.
I meant to listen to that after you said about how bad it was, Jamie. I meant to listen to it, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, it's the most fucking Kojima thing ever, isn't it? Like, I listened to that little intro thing. Just fucking hell. It's like, yeah, cool.
Did you think what I thought about the guy who dubs over him, the voice?
What?
Just that it sounds like a weird, like, emotionless robot.
Yeah, yeah.
And like,
and then with Kojima still speaking in the background.
Yeah, like how are you meant to listen to this? Which human was this made for? Whose ears is this made for?
Whose ears? I love it. Oh man, fellas, look, we were talking about one of the better games in the Assassin's Creed catalog, shall we say? And I said it was the best one, but I was mistaken because I thought they were talking about Odyssey. But hey, you know what? We're not going to wait too long for the next Assassin's Creed, as Assassin's Creed Mirage has been confirmed to be the next game in the series, following a leak of a DLC quest for the title on Ubisoft's own website. So yet again, Ubisoft own-goaling themselves. I just can't fucking help it, can they?
I love it.
It's on purpose by this point.
It's the leakiest fucking ship in gaming. It's got to be.
Yeah. Like, the funny thing is, like, that the nail in the coffin was Ubisoft leaking it themselves. But like 24 or 48 hours before they did that, we also had other leaks that were like, yeah, here's everything you need to know about this video game that they haven't announced yet.
Yeah, it's kind of mad. Loads of people kind of confirming it. Jason Schreier weighed in another Mirage week earlier in the week. We've seen what the DLC quest would be based on Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. We got some character art. Title will star Valhalla character Basim, and it's set in Baghdad. So, I mean, I don't know. I didn't play Valhalla. I don't know about this fucking character. Jamie, I remember you saying that some weird shit fucking happens with him in the game.
I still maintain that Assassin's Creed, I'm going to throw both Odyssey and Valhalla in there together because they both got funny shit. Like a kind of neck and neck with Wolfenstein: The New Colossus when it comes to games that I just want to explicitly spoil for everyone who listens to this podcast, because more people need to know about how fucking stupid their stories are in the best possible way. Basim is a really fucking stupid character when you know like who or what he actually is. I'm trying not to say too much.
I think you should, and if you don't, then
I don't, because I'm currently playing Valhalla and I still haven't finished it yet. And I know Basim, and I've done missions for Basim.
You know what, Alex Jones, fucking finish.
I don't want to find out what he actually is.
Finish Origins first, and then we'll talk. Right?
Nah, I wasn't a big fan of Origins.
You're not going to finish Valhalla, dude. I'm telling you, you're not going to finish it.
I doubt. I think I'm barely halfway through. I don't know if I can stick it out for another 15 hours or whatever.
It's a long game.
It's a long ass game, and there's a lot, and you build an entire bloody village, and then you're like, still more game? Okay.
Still more game.
Just keeps going.
I think the most interesting thing about this, in terms of what we've heard about it, obviously everything's speculative at this stage, but the idea of a more stripped back, old school AC inspired, stealth oriented Assassin's Creed game is interesting. Like, there have been rumors about things like some of the sort of like slightly more long-winded RPG systems like the leveling mechanics and the skill trees and dialogue trees all being taken out of things, and just try and get a more simple back to basics Assassin's Creed game. I will say I like that in theory. The only concern that I would raise is that if you can't achieve a back to basics Assassin's Creed game by taking Valhalla and stripping stuff out. I hope they strip stuff out, but also reintegrate more traditional old school Assassin's Creed mechanics and try and make something that feels like a more of a throwback AC style game. Because this is their like weird DLC that became a full game that's not coming out at full, and it's kind of the last one before their big Infinity thing. Like, do something different, have a bit of fun with it, experiment, and like get some fun ideas going. Why not? Throw shit against the wall.
What's annoying with this is you not like it wouldn't even take that much to get it back on track with like more old school stuff. They just need to sack off a whole bunch of stuff and just focus on the areas that people really care about, like the story, the progression through, you know, the weird shit, if they're going to keep any of the weird shit in. If they sack off the base building, you know, that those more sort of those elements to it, I don't think anyone would really care. Sure, you take a 60-hour game and you knock it down to like a 20-hour game, no one's going to complain that it wasn't long enough, especially if it had more of a, you know, a through road that was more of like an old school Assassin's Creed game. I'm not going to be like, do you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to build things and go on fetch quests for people and do more of those sorts of missions. No one's going to say that.
Totally. Especially with how readily available Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla all are now. And the fact that Origins and Odyssey do hold up and are getting 60 FPS patches and being released for free and all that stuff. Like, there's no shortage of ways to spend hundreds of hours playing Assassin's Creed right now. So, like, mix things up.
Yes.
Do you think that they can, though? Do you think that they could be successful in returning it back to its roots? Or have they gone too far? Have we as gamers progressed too much?
I don't know what
I think they could. Don't even think it'd be that difficult. Like, for example, like if they went back, fair enough, maybe people would be like, no, that's too far. But if you think about like the original Assassin's Creed, where you were very limited in like where you could go and the size of the map and stuff like that, I think even if they just rolled it back to doing like a few cities and just did the hell out of them on the current generation.
It's going to be one city, dude. It's going to be Baghdad.
But they're going to
potentially.
Yeah, like, I don't know. That might mean Baghdad, but it might also mean it's still giant. But it's just, you know, you can go outside and you can wander around. If they actually limited it down to sort of like actual, you know, the city and just did the hell out of it. Like, I like Syndicate for that. I like the fact that Syndicate was like, this is London. You're in London. It's contained. Everything is amazing and sprawling inside of a city. I don't really need the open world Assassin's Creed in the same way. I almost think that is because it just becomes another open world game, and I don't think that's what Assassin's Creed is. That's not its strongest, you know, selling point. Is that it's the verticality, it's the parkour, it's all of that stuff.
I also think that there are like one of the frustrations that a lot of old school AC fans have with Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla that I think has got more and more with each subsequent release is that you don't feel like an assassin anymore. And by the time that you're playing Valhalla, you are more of a Viking than you are an assassin, and you are running into big skirmishes with a bunch of dudes, and you've got a hammer in each hand, and you are spinning around and fucking chopping people's heads off, and it's your own unique brand of things. But we've changed a lot from the days where like Altair, you know, had his hood up, head down, sneaking through a crowd, like touching people's shoulders in a really creepy way, and in that kind of that classic thing of like, you know, that hidden blade where you would like go shink shink really quickly in someone's neck and turn around and walk off before anyone even noticed the body had hit the floor. And there's something really unique about that kind of that social stealth assassin, like that was able to kind of you know, like weave his way through a city completely unnoticed. That I think that it can get some of that essence back if they change the way that the story works, that they change the way that the mission is structured. And like all they need to do is get to a point where it can still control the same as Valhalla. Like the parkour can work the same as Valhalla. But imagine if instead of like being a Viking on a long ship surrounded by like 40 dudes raiding a village, it was like, you are now one person at this end of a city. You know that almost Hitman style. You have a target somewhere in this zone at the other end of the city, and like AC1 style. Like, here are some side missions you can do to find out what job this person has and where this person hangs out and what he might be wearing. And that sounds like Hitman ideas. Assassin's Creed 1 had shit like that. You'd have to go and eavesdrop on people, and you'd have to go and bribe people for information. And as soon as you get to a point in Assassin's Creed Mirage where Basim has one mission, it's like assassinate this target and leave the area, I think you can get back to that really cool, fundamental, old school AC feeling that would really give this franchise a breath of fresh air, even if it didn't have any new mechanics as such. That's what I'd like to see.
I completely agree with you. I think that would be something that they. I don't know if they would do it, but it would be amazing if they did.
I will say, sorry to just quickly, the key art is promising because it's an Altair looking Basim with his hood up, jumping with a hidden blade out, and there's like a crowd of people in front of him. Even just that key art gives me a little rumbling.
Because if you remember, like Assassin's Creed 1, it actually felt perilous when you got caught assassinating someone and the guards saw you, and you literally, it was like really clunky to like pull out your sword, and you didn't want to get into a fight with them because you were genuinely like, oh Jesus, I fucked up. It was more like you were saying, it's more like a Hitman game when someone has noticed something they shouldn't have, and then suddenly the game switches and you're like, you don't want to be in that situation. You then immediately want to get out of that, break the line of sight, and become hidden again. Assassin's Creed used to have that, whereas I think it maybe started with 3, which I did like 3. I actually, one of the few people who probably did. I actually really liked the way 3 worked, but you could run in like a Native American warrior and just beat the crap out of people with axes and whatever and feel cool. Whereas, let's get back to that Hitman style, sneaky, stealthy. It's dangerous to be caught. I'm well up for that.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get Jamie on a call with Eves and just make sure that they're doing that down the line.
But I have one last question to wrap up this segment and probably the podcast as well, fellas, because I'm deciding to flag big time.
That's fair.
But what happens if they have a triumphant return to the origins of Assassin's Creed? Okay. And then directly after that, they release this fucking abomination that is this Infinity, whatever they fucking want to call it, this vignettes kind of thing. And it's just like, wasted
but then
efforts.
If we take Infinity at face value, then it can house a whole number of experiences. And like maybe we end up in a momentary kind of like sort of like tricky area where Assassin's Creed Mirage is this really cool, stripped back, old school AC style thing.
AC/DC,
AC/DC style thing, yeah, exactly. And in the first Assassin's Creed, Infinity kind of, I don't even know what terminology to use, but game within the game is like some Ghost of Tsushima, feudal Japan, massive 200-hour thing. And people are like, oh God, there's nothing stopping the next thing within Infinity being a Mirage style experience.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if Infinity works the way we think it might.
It almost, you might find that it's actually a bunch of Mirage-style games woven together, like and other games, obviously other elements as well. So yeah, it could just mean that you just get more of the same.
Yeah.
I don't think, maybe they don't, maybe that is, the route to how they would do it. Then you can serve both audiences. You can serve the audience who want the massive RPG, and you can serve the audiences who want the more vignette experiences.
Yeah. It's gonna be fascinating seeing how Ubisoft's plan for Assassin's Creed plays out in the next few handful of months. It's going to be
the one thing that worries me is Ubisoft. So they're going to talk about it, say it's going to be amazing, and it'll come out when none of us will realize, and then a year later we'll talk about it and go, did that happen? And Jamie will go, yeah, man, loads of people would be, it's great, it's brilliant. And then
but not for Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, to be fair, that never happens to Assassin's Creed. Like, it's very easy to forget, but Assassin's Creed Valhalla was like the fastest selling Assassin's Creed game in the franchise history. Which
makes it even weirder that they do it with so many of their other titles, because surely they know how to do it successfully. Why do they then do it with other games like in other I don't get.
Because they're riding the wave.
I don't get
and all the other games is like they're trying to generate the wave, but there's not enough fucking force
maybe.
to propel that wave,
The wrong free-to-play titles at the wrong time, consistently.
Didn't Far Cry, the latest Far Cry, did like pretty abysmally, right? It didn't do very well.
I am not sure how that sold.
I think it sold fine, but I don't think it. Not like Valhalla being the apex in terms of sales. I don't think Far Cry 6 was the apex of sales for Far Cry.
Well, you can pick up Far Cry 6 for like 20 quid at the moment. So like,
yeah, even like just a brief look at Wikipedia. There's other than the fact that it seemed like it sold well in its first week, which of course it did. There's nothing really. I don't know if they've put out any official numbers.
middling review scores as well. To be fair, so
I mean,
maybe
I'll be honest. I don't like to admit this too readily, but I didn't finish Far Cry 6. I played like 2/3 of that game and then fell off.
I didn't even play it. I thought about it. I thought about it hard, which is shocking given that I'd played Far Cry Primal and I hadn't touched Far Cry 6. That feels like a dirty thing to admit.
No, I might like Far Cry Primal more than Far Cry 6.
Okay, right, there you go. Now I don't feel as bad.
That's my hot take.
I don't think I've ever missed a Far Cry game and then Far Cry 6 and I was like, yeah, it's looking good, and then it was a case of other stuff's coming out as well at the same time. I don't think I'm going to play Far Cry 6. And then I just haven't. I haven't, and it's been a year.
Oh man.
Shocking.
It's pretty shocking. Not as shocking as me ending this podcast, fellas. But hey, it's good to be back. It's good to
hammer down.
Be in digital proximity to you two. I can digitally smell the BO all the way from here. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to repeating the same next week.
We've got, I don't know about next week for sure, but we have got a big couple of weeks. I think this is going to be a big month for shit happening in the games industry. That's all I'll say.
It's going to be a few amazing weeks, and it's all going to be capped off in November by the release of God of War Ragnarok, where we'll do our biggest show of the year, where we just talk about God of War Ragnarok, and Jamie would have finished it by 2 days after it came out.
Yeah, probably.
It'll be massive. It won't get delayed. It won't be delayed.
Jamie,
it won't come out in February.
Are you taking time off work for?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you'll finish it in 2 days.
It's already booked. I can't remember. Well, I think it took me a bit longer to complete God of War 1, but that's also because I went for the platinum. I think I did the platinum in 5 days. On God of War 1, 4 or 5 days. So yeah, like maybe 2 days. We'll see.
Just out of interest. Your company, just out of interest, if you try to cancel holiday like within a certain amount of time, let's say you were going to do something and then it gets cancelled, do you have to take the holiday? Can you just get that back, or
you know what? Generally, I don't. I'll put it this way: I don't plan on finding out anytime soon.
So I tell you what, one thing that is funny. I'll briefly touch on there because obviously they had some like God of War Ragnarok Game Informer had a cover story, etc. There was some more footage came out, a bit of gameplay. I read the comments on Twitter because obviously people talking about it under the Game Informer thing. And there were people on there going like, oh man, this game's so getting delayed, isn't it? And then other people just being like, oh, what? It's coming out in November, you idiot. I was just like, it's interesting. There are still some people that are kind of like saying that as well. But now I feel like I'm in the bad camp. I feel like I'm in the bad of people that are like, it might get delayed. So, but
Sony doing a cover deal with Game Informer and giving them gameplay footage seems like a weird time to come out and this.
It does a little
Jamie,
bit.
you don't understand. It's a vertical
slice.
It
does a little bit. Well, we haven't seen it yet, so we don't know.
It's going to be a vertical slice. Yeah.
We haven't seen it yet.
This alluded to state of play with PlayStation. Do you know what? If the whole thing is God of War Ragnarok, I'll be so happy. If that is a thing and it does happen.
I mean, by all means, everything that they've done leading up to releases of big games recently, it can most certainly be just God of War focused for like 20 minutes.
Oh, but there's obviously the rumors that there's going to be one relatively soon, and if it is that, and if it is just, I will be made up. If we can actually see, some decent gameplay,
they got to do something. I all props to Game Informer, but like if after this big gulf and the kind of the weird aura that's been created around God of War Ragnarok gameplay, if it's Game Informer, they're like, here's 4 minutes of God of War Ragnarok gameplay uncut before PlayStation do. I'm like, wow, I didn't.
Oh no, but they will release it before PlayStation do.
Well, we presume so.
No, I
play.
Yeah.
There was a time when I said to both of you, if we haven't seen any God of War Ragnarok footage by the end of, I think it was June, and then I think it was July, I was like, will you be getting worried? And you were both like, yeah, a little bit. It's now September. And we still haven't had anything else.
I don't think I ever said I would have been worried, and I'm not worried now.
Maybe I'm misremembering. But, hey.
Hey, that's
It's not long to wait. It's not long to wait.
A game theory.
It's just a game theory. We haven't got long to wait now, so it's all good.
Oh yeah. All right, fellas. Well, with that, let's leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on a podcast platform of your choice, and hey, we'll see you next time. Bye.
See ya.
See ya.